those in which OCP had not entered the agency. But you can look through the titles and see where they go. Many of these are district schedule contracts uh, that they award as blanket contracts, for example, for office supplies and things like that. But not all of them are that way. Uh, there are a couple of instances where the same company got identical $950,000 contracts uh, for perhaps somewhat different things. But the pattern is so clear. 47% of all their dollar amounts were for $950,000. That evidence is, that's not a coincidence.
And you mentioned you found 30 contracts awarded at $950,000, totaling 28.5 million. So you do believe that this is an effort to bypass the procurement thresholds?
As I said in my uh, testimony, my written testimony, I'd love to hear their explanation. And these were exactly for that amount. They weren't less than 950 or more than that. They were exactly that amount.
Yeah. No, what do these findings indicate about the procurement practices in your mind, and what reforms would you recommend?
Well, I think the council setting a $1 million contract amount had some effect. If nothing else, the type of study that I did, which only takes about an hour to do,
Mhm.
uh, at that, should be forwarded to the council for review. And I think the agency, you could lower the threshold so much that you'd be flooded with contracts. It might thwart their attempts to go without council review, but it might then jam you up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
so
there's also been some healthy debate over the years about whether or not 1 million is too low of a threshold given the, size of our budget.
I agree, but I think cumulative amounts by agency should be looked at. I think the council,
Mm,
I worked on the council staff as a special assistant to David Grasso when he was a member. And Councilmember Grasso often abstained from voting on contracts because he
I
didn't have enough.
remember.
Yes,
I think that's the reason they're all on the consent agenda now, because the chairman got tired of saying, and Mr. Grasso shall be recognized as voting present.
right. Right.
Uh,
Exactly. But I think that looking at cumulative amounts, perhaps looking at an agency that awards more than 5 million, or go to individual agencies, um, or key personnel. There are a variety of ways of looking at these, but I think that history shows that the councils needs to have a really a different way of looking at contracts per se. Uh, you may ask I was in the DC auditor's office for a number of years, and that's the sort of question they love to wrestle with.
yeah. Um, and of course, it doesn't help that the threshold is set in the Home Rule Act. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well, it depends
there are
on what
ways.
part of the act. The council can change certain parts of the act, and they can certainly put in other thresholds and other reporting requirements.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate your testimony. Thanks for bringing your expertise back to the council today.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and good luck.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to keep going. Mr. Davis just asked for the link via email, so I think he'll be joining us, but we can, I think, incorporate him into the panel for Department of For Hire Vehicles. But thank you very much to this panel. Okay. Our next panel includes Carrie Savage, Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at PAVE, Anna Rodriguez, Parent Leader at PAVE, Stephanie Griffith Richardson, parent leader at PAVE. Ty Andrews, parent leader at PAVE. Kiana Lamons, parent leader at PAVE. Or
It needs to know.
Elizabeth Reddick, parent leader at PAVE. Sharn Boone Ruffin, parent leader at PAVE. Nia White, principal at Center City, Congress Heights. And Mr. Anthony Flood. Just give us a second to get everybody on the Zoom. But while we're doing that, Ms. Savage, you may begin your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau, members of the committee and committee staff. My name is Carrie Savage. I'm a Ward 1 resident and the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at PAVE, or Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. I first want to thank the Department of For Hire Vehicles team for providing safe, reliable transportation for kids to and from school through the DC School Connect program. We have heard from students, parents, and school leaders alike about how valuable the program is and its importance to ensuring students who are most at risk can get to school on time and safely every day. I also want to give a huge thank you to Director Rogers and his team for being extremely responsive and willing to engage with parents, schools, and community members. This is the type of leadership we need in these challenging times. For those who have access to DC School Connect, the program works. Those students, families, and school leaders love it. Khalil Cook, a student at Congress Heights campus of Center City Public Charter School, whom you'll hear from Naya in a second, has previously testified. DC School Connect gets rid of the risks students getting harmed or wounded throughout regular safe passage program by minimizing or eliminating students from having to be present in highly tense or volatile situations. The staff of DC School Connect knows how to de-escalate a situation and has never made me late for school. Principal Shelby at Kramer Middle School noted the program was extremely helpful for migrant students who were previously fearful of what could happen on their commute to school. The team at KIPP highlighted how impactful DC School Connect has been for KIPP Honor Academy, located in Ward 8 in particular, noting they've seen a reduction in fights and behavior incidents and that their experience has been especially great because they have dedicated staff to coordinate with the DC School Connect team and are able to address changes or issues quickly. The biggest complaint: more people want access than the current number of spots available. Chronic absenteeism in DC is unacceptably high at 40%. Parents and students alike say this is a large part due to the lack of safe, convenient, and reliable options for transportation to and from school. This is why Safe Passage has been one of PAVE parent leaders' top 2 policy priorities since 2023. Continuing to invest in safe passage programs that work, like DC School Connect, is critical to improving attendance rates and supporting our kids' overall success in school. We also deeply appreciate the Department of For Hire Vehicles team for embracing the program and their openness to brainstorming ways we can continue to move to improve it within their department. Here's what we have heard from both parents and our coalition partners regarding creative solutions to make DC Schools Connect as impactful as possible. First, improve information sharing with schools so that they can provide information for families. We cannot have a successful program if people don't know about it and all of the protocols, and we need dedicated school and program staff to coordinate throughout the year to ensure strong implementation. Next, consider adding stops on routes during and after the school day. During the day, routes can be added to places like the advanced technical centers to help students access specialized school programming. After school, DC School Connect can be used to provide transportation to OST programs by taking them to program sites or DPR facilities. Also, we can consider revisiting microtransit options and pickups from first and last mile routes from central metro hubs. Note, we do look forward to the upcoming working group report and hope the exploration of these items will support continued discussion. We are in an unprecedented time, and we need to make sure we boldly prioritize students, especially those who are furthest from opportunity. This work is only possible with leaders on the council who also believe in the power and promise of community voice and will stand up hand in hand with parents to ensure students get what they need and deserve. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to testify today. I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from Stephanie Griffith Richardson.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Griffith Richardson, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. Um, My son, Langston Richardson, attends Washington Global Public Charter School. I also serve with Parents Amplifying Voices in Education on the Ward 7 PLE board. I'm a concerned parent and an active community member for Ward 7. I come before you today to advocate for the continuation and expansion of safe transportation options for our students, especially through the DC School Connect program, as it is critical for the safety and well-being of our children. As a single parent, last year I was deeply grateful for the seat my son had on the DC Connect bus with to EW Stokes, a school located in Ward 7. The transportation alleviated a significant burden for me. However, I was aware that many other parents at Stokes were not as fortunate. It is disheartening to learn that many parents are stuck on a long wait list for this vital service. Even more concerning is that my son's route only had 6 out of 15 available seats were being utilized, leaving many families without access to reliable transportation. Numerous parents at Stokes have shared their frustrations at being placed on a wait list that, despite applying early, often receiving no updates or responses to their inquiries. Having been in the same position the previous year, I know firsthand how discouraging and disempowering it can be to have no clear answers or support. In addition to the lack of seats, there is significant safety concerns related to the current bus routes. In DC, neighborhoods can vary dramatically from block to block. And while we are fortunate to live in a safe area, just 2 blocks away from our home is a dangerous neighborhood known for criminal activity. The bus route required my child to cross Minnesota Avenue Southeast, a busy high-speed road with no crossing guard and limited pedestrian signals. The area is notorious for criminal activity, and recent reports from MPD indicate that the crime, including shootings, stabbings, and assaults, have increased in the vicinity. I'm perplexed as to how bus routes were mapped out and whether safety considerations, including crime data, were adequately reviewed. In my experience, I had to rely on personal communications with the driver to assist and stay informed about the route updates, as the DC Connect app is non-functional and does not provide any real-time notifications and communication. While these concerns are critical, there is an even greater opportunity to expand, improve the DC School Connect program. This program plays a vital role in ensuring that our students have access to reliable and safe transportation to school. With a few operational changes, this program effectiveness can be greatly enhanced, benefiting many more families across the district. I respectfully ask that you consider the following: redirect funds from the non-functional app to hire additional dispatch workers and administrative support who can actively manage a seat allotment and communicate with parents throughout the school year. Collaborate with MPD and the Deputy Mayor for Education to review safety data and reassess the bus routes, ensuring that students are not exposed to dangerous situations on their way to and from school, and expand the DC School Connect routes to transport more students, especially those in high need areas like Ward 7 and 8, and to prioritize middle school students who have limited transportation options to access quality schools. Thank you for allowing me to testify today and for your attention to this important matter. Our children deserve safe and reliable transportation. And I believe with your support, we can ensure that DC School Connect programs meets to its full potential to serve our communities.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from Ana Rodriguez.
Hello. Let me lower my hand. Good afternoon. My name is Ana Rodriguez, and I'm a proud parent of a 9th grade student who attends McKinley Tech High School in Ward 5. I also serve as the McKinley Tech Parent Teacher Organization President with PAVE Parent Amplifying Voices of Education on the citywide board for Ward 5 Parent Leader. And thank you for the opportunity to testify on such a program, especially for DC School Connect. Each day I drive my daughter to school because there is no safe alternative to get her to school. McKinley Tech, we live close enough that she could walk or take the bus to school. However, due to violence, unsafe drivers, unsafe sidewalks, I do not feel comfortable having my child get to school without me driving her. I'm here today to urge the council and the DC for Hire vehicle to continue to fund and expand DC School Connect so that students like my daughter have a safe way to get to school. Just the other day, I received an urgent phone call from my daughter asking if I could pick up one of her friends from school and drive them home, since there had been an online chatter about beating the student up at the metro stop after school. My daughter wanted to ensure that her friend was safe, and that was the only way for her to be able to do that, was to call me so I could drive them home. It shouldn't have to be the only way. The student should not have to worry about their safety while traveling to and from school. DC School Connect provides the district the chance to have a student-only form of transportation that is safe, convenient, and reliable. I understand the difficulty that creating new routes creates. Let's get creative instead of having to create routes that may require driving across the river through high traffic areas. Let's utilize DC School Connect for micro transit or last mile transportation, or DC School Connect can expand to ensure buses at popular metro stops and the drive the students from metro stop to their school. This would be especially beneficial for middle and high school students who take the train to school. DC School Connect is working well for the students it serves. We must expand it to serve more students so that our students have a way to get to school and can focus once they are in the classroom. Not only must we expand the DC School Connect, we must also increase communication with parents, students, schools, the community, and government agencies. The Department for Hire Vehicles must increase and improve its communication about DC School Connect to ensure the community has a clear understanding of the program. The Department for Hire Vehicles must partner with other government agencies like the Deputy Mayor of Safety, or DDOT, or of course the DME, to collaborate on how to provide safe passage to the district students. Our students deserve the best. They deserve to feel safe, to feel ready to learn, to feel excited about their futures. Continuing to fund and expand DC School Connect gives our students the chance to focus on being kids. I urge the council to work with the Department for Hire Vehicles to expand DC School Connect. And again, thank you. And thank you. If you have any questions, you can ask me at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Ty Andrews.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Ty Andrews. I'm a Ward 8 resident. I'm also a proud parent of 2 children. One home attends Mary H. Plummer Elementary, and another of whom attends McKinley Technology High School. I'm a parent leader with PAVE, a citywide and Ward 8 PLE board member, the first vice president of the McKinley Tech Educational Campus PTO, and a parent LSAT member for Plummer Elementary. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the importance of the DC School Connect and its role in providing safe passage for our students. Nowadays, children are exposed to severe aggression, violence, sexual assault, private exposure, drug use, and more each day on public transportation. My high schooler and I have experienced some unfortunate events, and other families have experienced worse. Why would a parent want to send their child to school if the parent or the child does not feel safe traveling to and from using public transportation? Parents do not have the means to Uber or drive their children to school, especially in Ward 8, where many children travel outside of their wards for a better education. Also, the Metro has regular delayed trains and buses, and there is sometimes much traffic that the bus routes cannot avoid. Suppose a student's main transportation is public and there are always delays. In that case, you can expect a child to be on time, especially when traveling for over an hour to get to and from school. Public transportation safety has deteriorated over the years. No one pays for their fare. Women and children with strollers all over the place, taking over their handicapped seats, and people playing loud, derogatory music, urinating, smoking cigarettes and marijuana, and more. Metro is not a safe environment, let alone for a child, especially when considering other issues that Metro has. At least once a week, my eldest son comes home from school complaining about witnessing fights and arguments on Metro while either trying to get to or from home and school. When he was in middle school, he was actually attacked outside of a Metro station, and it was reported and no action was taken by WMATA, MPD, or his school despite multiple follow-ups. DC School Connect provides a safe and consistent way for students to get to and from school daily. I ask that the district expand the DC School Connect program so that more students have access. I'm asking the Department of For-Hire Vehicles to increase the DC School Connect routes during school arrival and dismissal, prioritizing those with the greatest need during enrollment. The Department of For-Hire Vehicles is not alone in this work. For an increase in routes, the Department of Operations and Infrastructure and DC Human Resources will need to work together to recruit and retain more bus drivers for the DC School Connect program. More routes will increase access, and those who can utilize it will have safer and more efficient commutes to school. Safe passage involves many different pieces working together to make the community safer. The Department for Hire Vehicles plays a big role in that work. I'm thankful for the work that the DC School Connect and the Department for Hire Vehicles have done to keep our children safe thus far. I look forward to seeing positive change in the next year, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Kiana Lamons.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Quiana Lamont. I'm a proud Ward 7 resident and a paid parent leader. All my children attend DC Public Schools. I'm here today to speak about the critical importance of continuing to fund and expand DC School Connect to support safe passage to and from school for our students. Safe passage is a key to helping students in the district thrive. Having a safe way for our students to get to and from school each day will increase the number of students in school. This can help lower truancy rate. The more frequency students go to and from school are able to focus on learning, the more likely we will see improvement in math and reading across the district. Safe passage is the key to ensuring our students can succeed. DC Connect provides a safe and reliable way to get our students to and from school each day. We are advocating to continue funding and expanding our DC School Connect program. We need to expand the program in order to give more children the opportunity to have a safe and reliable way to get to school. Ideally, as the program grows, it will include equipping DC School Connect with the proper training to ensure our students with disability can receive the support they need if they decide to take DC School Connect. This is not meant to replace RC buses, but instead offers parents more options for how to get their students to school. DC School Connect provides parents with a sense of relief and peace as they know their children have a safe way to get to school without having to worry about the chaos or dangers that can occur on public transportation. Not only should DC Connect expand its services, but the program must improve communication with parents, students, school, and the community. I'm a Ward 7 resident who is eligible for DC School Connect, but I have not received any information about the program. In order to ensure that DC School Connect program is being utilized to the maximum capacity and serving as many students as possible, you must let the community know about the services. DC School Connect should create mailers to send out to each eligible student address in Ward 7 and 8. We do not have to opt in to get mail on candidates for election. It just shows up in our mail and provide us with the information that we need. The same should be done for sharing information about DC School Connect. Families should not have to seek it out. Instead, it should be easily accessible. I believe DC School Connect has the potential to have real impact on safe passage in the district. Schools used to be a place our children love to go, but now it's a place they are scared to go. DC School Connect can help fix that. We should grow DC School Connect to serve more students in our community. I urge the council to work with the Department for Hire Vehicles to continue to fund and expand DC School Connect programs so that all students have a safe passage to and from school each day. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Elizabeth Reddick.
My apologies. Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Reddick, and I am a Ward 7 resident with a 7th grade student at Monument Academy. I am also the ANC commissioner for 7B05 and a paid parent leader. I want to thank our council member, our chairperson, Nadeau, for always showing up for Ward 7, even when people don't know that you're here. You're here, so thank you for that. I'm here to advocate about the importance of advancing equity in education By implementing various initiatives, you can create a more equitable school system, expanding the pathway to middle class and allowing Native Washingtonians to thrive in the district. In order to ensure equity, we must provide our student with safe passage to school. I believe that it's imperative that we continue to fund and expand DC School Connect because it provides a safe and reliable way for our students to get to school. When students have a secure way to get to school, it allows them to enter the classroom ready to learn, specifically by reducing anxiety, for example. Not only does DC School Connect provide a way for students to get to and from school, it also provides a way for students to take advantage of one of the district's most exciting educational opportunities, and that's the Advanced Technical Center. DC School Connect works with the Advanced Technical Center and some of its partner schools to provide transportation to and from ATC during the school day. This service is essential, and without it, these kids would not be able to make it to class on time. As we continue to implement new and innovative opportunities for our students, we need to prepare themselves to enter the workforce. We must think through how we can make these opportunities equitable. Having transportation to and from ATC during the school day through DC School Connect makes that program equitable, and it provides by providing transportation. I am passionate about increasing our students' pathways to a fair shot of success and expanding pathways to the middle class. The partnership between ATC and DC School Connect plays a role in expanding these pathways. I urge the council to continue to fund and expand the Department of For-Hire Vehicles DC School Connect program. Our children deserve not just to survive in the district, but to thrive. By continuing to make these programs equitable and accessible, we are doing exactly that. I also urge the council to support the Department of For-Hire Vehicles. I'm sorry, I just read that part. Thank you for your the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words as well. Next, we'll hear from Tara Brown.
I'm sorry, did you call me?
I didn't. You're going to be next, but I called Tara Brown and she's not responding yet, so you may be sooner than you think. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. And
Okay.
now I can see you too.
Okay, all right. Please forgive my face. I damaged my eye last night. I cannot see.
Oh
Therefore, I
dear.
cannot read my testimony, but this was important enough for me to just come on and speak from the heart. My name is Brown. I am a Ward 8 resident, a PAVE, PLE, and citywide board member, a former ANC commissioner. I have a lot invested in my community, and I would really like to encourage the Department for Hire Vehicles to make the same investments in myself and other families. My daughter was sexually assaulted on a Metro bus coming home from school. And that experience forever changed me and it forever changed her. And I can tell you that this is not an isolated incident because public transportation, WMATA, is simply not safe. I understand that DC School Connect is really not what the Department for Hire Vehicles does. But if it's there, I urge you to treat the program with the same respect as all of the other programs that they're responsible for. If you look at the website, it is sparse, it is uninformative, it is unhelpful. It does not talk about when you can register, due dates, how to register. It gives no information on routes and stops. There's a paragraph there's a link that talks about routes and stops, but it says, once you're registered, you'll get information about the routes and the stops. That is not helpful to us. Parents with jobs and families, we need information to be easy to access and to be made clear. And It makes no sense for a program that is so vital, that schools want, that parents want, that students want, who travel in fear every day. My daughter had to travel from Anacostia to Minnesota Avenue. That's a war zone. And it's very scary. And parents put children in harm's way just so they can get to a school that we think is best for their needs. DC School Connect is so important. And at the very least, I know it can't serve every student, but the program should be doing everything it can to promote and advertise to make sure that there are no empty seats on any of those buses. Because the more students that we can get to and from school safely, the better it is for everyone. So in my last 10 seconds, I urge the Department for Hire Vehicles to embrace that program and to treat it as important as it is, because without safe passage, we really don't have school choice. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And next we'll hear from Principal Nia White.
Good morning. Maybe my camera will come in some point in time. Sorry. Good morning, esteemed city council members and Chairwoman Nadeau. My name is Nia White, principal of the Congress Heights campus of Center City Public Charter Schools located in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., which is also classified as a safe passage priority zone. To start my testimony on the significance and impact of the DC Connect program, I offer the following details. Last week, a fight from local high school students breaks out. And as they have been dispersed as best as possible from MPD, emotions and tensions still ran high. Next thing you know, the W4 bus arrives, but it is already packed, and those young people grow even more frustrated now that they have to wait longer for the following bus that is 10 minutes out. Now imagine standing there with a 3, 5, and 11-year-old as they look up at you because they are concerned and looking for guidance of what this pot of tension surrounding them is and how uncomfortable it feels for them. 2 weeks ago, picture a fight breaking out and needing to secure not only yourself, but your walkers. 4 weeks ago, picture walking your students to the bus stop, and as you walk back, a student that has been hit by a car at an intersection where the traffic light has turned into a suggestion. 5 weeks ago, picture a parent calling you at 8 a.m. to let you know that there is a shooting that just happened with no other entities to call you or notify you, and needing to walk into the danger to find the student to Metro and walk from that direction. Now, I can certainly continue, but for the sake of time, I will pause to highlight that all of these students are students of mine who would and could be removed from these dangers due to DC Connect services. We presently have 10 families who use DC Connect daily, and I promise you that all of these families are experiencing far less environmental trauma since the DC Connect students avoid being exposed to so much by the way of the service. These students always show up to school on time and have a comfort in always knowing how they are getting home. They are safe. When the program began, we had upwards of 30 families utilizing the service. And now with reduced opportunities, we have fewer participants, but a large and growing wait list. Additionally, students who relied on DC Connect at its beginning, who were a part of after-school activities, could participate in activities in the evenings and still be picked up by DC Connect to get home, which is also no longer an option for them. I heavily encourage our city council leaders to at least maintain this program at present levels, but hope it can expand. Additionally, if there are concerns with finding drivers and or having enough for drivers to do in between mornings and afternoon arrivals, I would love to partner to be a pilot of using and even paying to use the very DC Connect buses and drivers for our during the day field trip experiences for students. Last but not least, I advocate to add seating for pre-K3 and pre-K4 students to close the barrier of need and use for families. My students need this service. Please do not take it away. And we also have ample evidence at the school and government level that the DC Connect program must remain with the Department for Hire Vehicles, because under all other transportation options, the program would never run or remain as efficient and reliable as it is at present. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I am open for questions and comments.
Thank you. We will now hear from Sharn Boone Ruffin. Sharn, do you need assistance unmuting? All right, we will come back to Sharn. Joey Davis, if you'd like to testify now on the Office of Contracts. Oh, hold on a second.
I'm sorry. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry, Joey. Hang on there. Yes, Sharn, go ahead and testify.
I can't hear anybody. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay. I can't hear anybody, but I'm gonna go ahead. Hello, Councilmember Nadeau and members of the DC Council. I'm Sean Boone Ruffin, a Ward 8 resident and PAVE Ward 8 citywide PLE board member. I'm also a Dunbar School Engineering Academy, Hope Tolson Public Charter Academy parent. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm so excited to share my perspective as both a parent and educator. Each day, students across the district travel to and from school. Each day, students are exposed to unsafe situations as they travel to and from school. This must stop. We must provide our students with safe passage. This is why we must continue to fund and expand DC School Connect. This program can help to lower truancy rates with increased classroom learning time, potentially leading to an increase in performance in math and reading. If our students do not have a safe way to get to school, they may not go. They will lose out on a chance to develop their math and reading skills, to learn more about the world around them, to cultivate their passions, and ultimately are losing out on a chance to set themselves up for success. I have to drive my daughter to and from school each day as she commutes from Ward 8 to Dunbar High School. My daughter is a driven and motivated student who has plans to graduate high school early. She deserves a safe way to get to and from school that does not involve taking a bus, then a train, and then walk alone 22 minutes to get to her school. Expanding DC School Connect will provide my daughter with a safe way to get to school, ensuring she can focus on her AP honors classes. We must do better for the students in DC. We have the opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of our students. Let's take this opportunity to continue to fund DC School Connect so our students can set themselves up to be successful not only in the classroom, but in our community each and every day. Thank you for the Department of Hire Vehicles for the work they have done so far with DC School Connect program. Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for your continued partnership with PAVE parent leaders. I look forward to continuing work together to give our DC kids the best. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And now Joey Davis.
Good morning, Chairperson Nadeau, members of the council, and other individuals testifying today. My name is Joey Davis, and I'm the president of AFGE Local 1975, representing the dedicated vehicle inspection officers of the DC Department of For-Hire Vehicles. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on several pressing concerns affecting the efficiency, morale, and fairness within the agency. First, between grade promotions for officers are not based on seniority or any clear objective criteria. This lack of transparency has led to frustration among employees who see no clear path for career progression, resulting in avoidable turnover. Promotions should be awarded fairly and based on measurable experience, knowledge, and performance, rather than through arbitrary or inconsistent decision-making. Second, hiring for management level positions appears to consistently favor external candidates, bypassing qualified individuals within the agency, a practice that seems to have become endemic across all district agencies. This practice results in the placement of supervisors who lack the necessary knowledge to perform their roles effectively or to properly evaluate the employees that they oversee. This not only causes frustration amongst employees, but also undermines the efficiencies of the agency's operations. Management decisions should be informed by experience within the agency, ensuring that supervisors understand the responsibilities and challenges of those they are assigned to manage. Additionally, there have been significant issues with missing equipment from the agency, including a tough book, a laptop, police radios, body armor vests, and numerous uniforms. Such losses compromise the safety and effectiveness of our officers. Management was, or at least should have been, aware of these deficiencies. Yet employees report that some members of the management team at Department of For-Hire Vehicles rarely even show up to work. A lack of accountability at the management level only exacerbates these concerns and must be addressed. Another issue is the uniformity of SMART goals across all officer grades. Currently, all grades have the same SMART goals, effectively negating any distinction between them. This contradicts the intended purpose of having graded positions and further demoralizes employees who see no recognition for their increased responsibilities or experience. Further, approximately 70% of the officers' SMART goals center around ticket writing, rather than their primary function of conducting vehicle inspections. This misalignment shifts focus away from the core duties of their job and undermines the essential role that they play in ensuring the safety and compliance of the for-hire vehicle industry within the district. Lastly, the agency is considering assigning officers responsibility for monitoring scooters without any consultation with the union. This is yet another example of management imposing additional duties on officers without a plan for appropriate compensation or resources. Such unilateral decision-making disregards the collective bargaining process and disrespects the officers' hard work and commitment. The issues I've outlined today demand immediate attention. We urge Council to hold the Department of For-Hire Vehicles leadership accountable and to work toward implementing fair promotion standards, ensuring competent and knowledgeable supervision, addressing management absenteeism, clarifying job responsibilities, and respecting the role of the union in workplace decision-making. I thank you for your time this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have following my testimony.
Thanks very much to our whole panel. And Mr. Davis, we will follow up on the concerns that you have raised with the agency. But one thing I wanted to mention, so VIOs have already been involved in enforcement of delivery, thus mopeds, for the last few years. Have you heard any issues with that existing work?
The fact that there are so many of them now, and there's not really a tangible plan for how to tackle the volume of the scooters. They are now possibly going to be impounding scooters as well, and that would potentially involve them being actual sworn in law enforcement officers. So the agency is considering upping the ante on that, which, you know, we support safer streets, we support that regulation. But if we're going to do that, we need to fairly compensate our officers. And with the increased level of responsibility, the real issue is that there has been no increase in compensation for them. So again, we have no problem increasing responsibility or ensuring that regulatory action occurs, but we would ask that Council work with the agency to find ways to compensate those officers for the additional responsibilities they've undertaken.
Got it. And so you're saying it would be the VIOs that would be impounding them, not MPD, which is what currently happens?
The agency just had a meeting to look into having them do just that, yes. So it could potentially end up being the officers at the For-Hire Vehicles agency as opposed to MPD.
Okay, and not the officers who already impound vehicles through the use of the tow cranes?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I want to thank all of our PAVE leaders for attending today. Truly appreciate your advocacy on behalf of our students. Certainly some really poignant and terrible stories being shared. So I thank you for sharing all of that, despite the fact that it's probably pretty painful to recount it. Ms. Savage, can you talk about PAVE's participation in the Deputy Mayor for Education's working group on the future of the pilot program?
Sure. The DME invited us to have a coffee chat or listening session with paid parent leaders. It was sometime in the fall, I want to say October, November timeline. And they were just asking questions, you know, knowing that DC School Connect has been a priority for parents. They wanted to get their input on what they wanted to see for the next chapter of the program. And so parents shared a lot of the things that that you heard today around it being important, wanting it to stay protected, and if anything, just want more people to have access to it and address some of the communication issues that they raised.
And have you been part of the conversation around the actual transition planning?
No.
Okay. Any?
My understanding is that the report's coming out soon.
Yes.
But that's all yeah.
Okay. Any, have you heard anything about how it's going from others who are involved at all? Do you have a sense of it? Your impression?
I don't know much. And I think there's a lot of support for it saying if the program, for it to stay in the Department for Hire Vehicles. I think it was especially raised, like, you know, analyzing other options. Department for Hire Vehicles is a good home. And Director Rogers, as I mentioned in my testimony, you know, noted that they embrace the program and are okay with its fit in its current spot. And outside of that, I know there's a lot of logistical components to this, right? Like I know we raised the ATC, and there's like definitely some issues to figure out with timing to make sure that, like, if that is a route we go in terms of making DC School Connect more efficient and able to serve more folks in more ways. Like, I'm not saying that all of those things, you know, getting a good group of people, a diverse group of people at the table to sit down and talk those out. I just think those are problems that we can tackle together, and especially with such responsive leadership from the Department for Hire Vehicles team. Because from what I know, the working group was government folks only. And so it didn't bring out outside folks. But I think there's, like, Principal White has amazing perspective on the ins and outs of the program. And I think she would be a great person to bring to the table.
Thank you for that. Has there been any sort of opportunity for PAVE leaders to talk directly with WMATA to provide feedback on the safety and security for students in the system?
Is that a question?
Anyone who wants to answer, in case we got some freelancers here.
I'm happy to tee it up, and then folks, my lovely PAVE family on the call, if they want to chime in. There's been a couple opportunities, certainly outside, like, you know, there's been testimony at hearings for folks to share. But we've also had an opportunity to talk to the WMATA team. I want to say it was last summer, June, July, at the tail end of their work on the bus redesign. And we raised some safety issues there. And so I welcome folks. I know there's a few people who are on the hearing with us today that might have joined that call and been able to share then. But it was a single meeting.
Thanks. Yeah, anyone who was there that wants to share sort of how WMATA received your input?
Well, I wasn't on that meeting, but I have testified to WMATA, and I have been a strong advocate in my community, and working on both sides, looking for programs that can be successful like DC Connect, but at the same time, working within the parameters that we have and asking for WMATA, one, efficiency and effectiveness on the buses, because there is so much that's happening on the buses. And what we are finding that is, you know, what we're asking for is met with somewhat resistance about, you know, financial constraints and other routes and things like that. But we are parents who are entrusting our child to traverse outside of Ward 7 and 8. Without any recourse and accountability to WMATA to effectively do that safely. And so they've heard us, but not really in the spirit of affecting tangible things that can improve the quality of lives for us across DC.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Ms. Reddick?
Sorry. I should raise my hand.
Oh, that's okay. We're not formal, but yeah, we'll go Ms. Reddick and then Ms. Brown.
I also was not a part of that conversation, but I will offer this. I have participated when WMATA does their community meetings. Usually not a lot of people show up if anybody shows up. But also, um, I do feel like WMATA has responded in the sense that now, like when you go to certain substation, like you go to certain stations, you'll see security present. You'll see security actually on the trains themselves. Those are direct response, I believe, to our advocacy. You'll also see them outside of the station itself. Now, the stations that they're going to, maybe more conversation can be had around that. When events do occur, they will kind of move their I don't know what their term is, but I'll call them safety ambassadors, right? So they'll have safety ambassadors that show up, like say for example, Eastern Market or Potomac or Brooklyn, wherever, right? In response to different events that are happening. So I do feel like to a certain extent they're listening, but to me, I feel like the biggest concern is what they're legally obligated to do, what the legal barrier are. What I'm talking about as far as like maybe it's their federal funding or whatever. That's what I always hear the response is, because of federal funding, we can't do this or we can't do that. But the other part is we all know that they change their schedule every couple of months in response to school being in or school being out. And I don't think that they've acknowledged that we see that like the routes change when summer comes. The routes change when it's time for school to go back. So if these changes are, being made because, ridership is changing, regardless if you want to call it that or not, we know it has to do with school. So like, you can't make those changes and then pretend like you don't know that this is happening. So I think it would be good to just have an honest conversation about how we can do this in a way and not just take our feedback and not include us in the planning process. I think that's where the disconnect is. You have to include the schools. You have to include MPD. You have to include park police. You have to include everybody in the conversation instead of just the way they're doing it is inefficient. That's the best way I can say.
Thank you. Ms. Brown and then Ms. Rodriguez.
So WMATA's role in transporting our children safely, I think, is just as important as DC School Connect. And it is my hope that they will work together, because not every child who travels to school can fit in DC School Connect. And so the ones that don't have the opportunity to travel that way rely on WMATA to do a better job of ensuring their safety. And I'm going to call them safety ambassadors as well. They started a program. They're around. I think they have responded to the call, but they need to stop making excuses and start making it a priority, because that is the major mode of transportation for our children going to school. I can tell you a safety ambassador on the bus that my child was traveling on when she was assaulted would have made all the difference, because there were plenty of people on that bus and no one did anything to help her. So just someone saying, "Hey, stop," might have changed the experience for her, and for other kids who were bullied and assaulted and stalked. That happened to my daughter as well. A grown man stalked her for her 10th grade year until he was removed by the police. The WMATA's role is important, but I don't think it will replace the importance of DC School Connect.
Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez.
So when I think of it in two ways. Let me give it to you in one good way. So in one good way, my daughter does belong to a group through WMATA Metro Police, where they go and they meet twice a month. They get hours, and she gets to like voice her concerns on safety that's going on buses and stuff, and they do this. So they do partially have a thing where they're meeting with the students. But me living here in Ward 5, where Ward 1 and Ward 5 touches, with the bus stops being discontinued, with a bunch of traffic issues from Florida to New York Avenue, the hustle and bustle, the fact that we didn't have, even as a resident of those both wards, we didn't have time to even respond on the surveys that they gave prior to. So like all these decisions that are being made now, if we knew as a community that we could have been responded on surveys prior to them making these decisions, a lot of these things could have been taken care of. As far as me, in my opinion, I feel like with WMATA, with working with the families, I'm a PTO president of McKinley Tech. I also sat on the DC school boundary, and I was Ward 5. And McKinley Tech Middle needs DC Connect because almost over 80% of the students are from Ward 7. So you got kids traveling east of the river to go to McKinley Middle. Of course, the boundary is going to change, and that's a whole other thing, but we're not there yet. But we look at the safety of the kids coming from all those areas, from Dunbar to Kip to Friendship, just clustering right at Noma. And we have a lot of incidents. Me driving, like I said, I pick my daughter up, but I think if we have staggering times where DC Connect can get the kids to one metro from the school, I think this will help, since I feel we get pushback from WMATA. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Go ahead. Well, hit your mic though.
Some of the other engagements that I know we've had around WMATA and Safe Passage generally have been at Safe Passage summits that schools have hosted, so that folks can see in real time and hear from students about their experience directly, and then talk together. And so Ms. White, to put you on the spot, I don't know if you want to share about your experience. She hosted a Safe Passage summit at her school that WMATA and MPD and other government folks attended, so they could hear from Congress Heights students.
Yes, so our Safe Passage summits have been in efforts of trying to like bring and get everybody together, all the entities, Safe Passage ambassadors, MPD, WMATA, Metro Transit, DDOT, everybody, just so that the students in particular can raise up their concerns and the things that they see and report, outside of just like me always being the front runner of concerns and situations. I would say from our school's perspective, what I can say with the students, hands down, I've already said, is that they only receive any engagement period from the school division or the youth division of WMATA Metro Transit. In terms of just like WMATA in general, a lot of folks are just unaware. At every summit and safety meeting that we've ever been a part of, WMATA goes strictly by like the routes and everything that they've had published since like Lord knows how long. But the reality of what happens on the street, the frequency of the buses, we've had countless back and forth and communication around, like, especially with the W4. The W4 serves like 7,000 plus students in the city. And with the not paying attention, I would say, to the coordination of all the schools' dismissals, regular residents, like how frequently the buses should be running in the morning and the afternoon, like it's a huge deficit. We get a lot of kids that get bypassed in the morning, which is why they get to school late, because the buses are massively packed and filled. Like that's a huge bus line and it's underserved with drivers and the buses in general. So it's always a back and forth, and we hold those summits just to make sure that everybody is staying, like, we call it like being honestly honest, not trying to hurt anybody's program or come after anybody, but we want to honestly raise the concerns and the issues that we're seeing on the ground every day.
Since you're holding those summits, are you familiar with the program Go DC Go that DDOT has for schools?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So for those who don't know it, this was new. I didn't really know about this program. DDOT has a school services program that provides complimentary consultations to DC public, private, and charter schools for transportation improvements, which could be something that we could pair with other efforts if can do it in a way that doesn't create more work for our school leaders. I have one more question for you, Principal White, and then I can go to you, Ms. Rodriguez. One of the proposals that has come up in the Deputy Mayor's Working Group on school transportation is to give schools or clusters of schools direct funding to address their specific transportation barriers for students. Is that something you think you would utilize if it was available?
For sure. If it meant that we could secure set transportation and also not only secure the set transportation, make sure that it was solely for the students, for me to only, have to worry about just the students that were in this particular building, but then also design and define out like where those stops and routes would be coming in the afternoon, especially for after school activities. That would be beneficial. But I also want to add like in previous meetings for the Go DC Go folks, they really haven't presented or come across as a transportation support, but more so a focus on students and families in schools finding nice ways and paths for particularly students to bike to school, which is not something that the Ward 8 students of mine actually need, like not at all. And but anything around actual outside like third party transportation or doing anything additional to further improve like the circumstances that we are encountering with our bus routes, they don't have that mastered yet. I'll say it that way.
And your students, are there the same safety concerns about biking as walking? Is that why you say it's not for them?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez?
Oh, I just wanted to say about that program, DC Go. The only thing with that program, you have to be 16 years old to actually participate in that program. They do have certain schools that are already affiliated, like School Without Walls, Jackson Reed. I've tried to get McKinley on there because they host a couple of high schools. But the unfortunate part, what about our 15 and 14-year-olds and our 13-year-olds because of not having headgear? So if there was a way we could sponsor a program to give headgear to our kids and expand it to being 14 or 13, it would work. But right now it's 16-year-olds that can benefit off of it. And a lot of kids are aware of it, but 16, by the time you're 16 and 17, you're already a junior or senior. That's all I wanted to say.
No, that's great. Very good insights. Well, thank you everybody for your participation in this panel. I truly appreciate it. At this point, I'm going to be calling our government witness to testify, the Director of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles, Jonathan M. Rogers. When you're ready, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. You may begin your testimony.
I believe we have a slide deck to go through during my testimony.
Great. And are we advancing the slides? Nicole's
Please,
going to.
yes,
Okay.
please.
Great.
I'll notify you.
Great. I'm gonna.
All right. Thank you so much. Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, members of the DC Council and staff. I am Jonathan Rogers, Director of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles, or DFHV. It is a privilege to serve the District of Columbia government in this role and to testify before you today. I'd like to thank Mayor Muriel Bowser for appointing me to lead the DFHV and for her trust in our team. I would also like to acknowledge the DFHV staff for their steadfast commitment to upholding our mission in the field, in the community, and in our offices. We have a talented, skilled, and diverse team in whom I have full trust to carry out their work. Lastly, I thank the for-hire vehicle industry professionals for their continued service transporting residents, workers, and visitors throughout Washington, D.C. DFHV has made significant progress in upholding our mission to protect the public by regulating safe, affordable, and accessible transportation. Safety remains our top priority for drivers, passengers, and others. Now, I would like to refer to the slide presentation accompanying my testimony as I highlight the agency's structure, recent accomplishments, and our focus for 2025. In doing so, I hope to provide insight into how we enhance mobility while illustrating the context of the challenges facing our stakeholders and promising approaches for improvement. So on slide number 2. In fiscal year 24, DFHV accomplished its mission. Safety is paramount for our passengers and operators. In support of Mayor Bowser's Vision Zero initiative, DFHV's vehicle inspection officers, or VIOs, ensure for-hire operators are driving safely and that their vehicles are safe to operate. Last year, our VIOs conducted 20,301 stops, issued 9,942 citations, in addition to impounding 840 vehicles. The most common safety violations are those related to vehicle safety and obstructing crosswalks or intersections. For carriers for hire, the most common violation has been failure to provide a valid driver's license. Our enforcement keeps our streets safe and ensures drivers operate efficiently and legally. Another safety program is DC School Connect, which we've heard about, which continues to transport students to and from school, avoiding potential neighborhood public safety hazards along the way. In the 23-24 school year, our program completed 57,431 trips and served 429 students. We've experienced no significant safety issues with our students since the program began in 2022. To further improve the roadway safety of the program, DFHV partnered with the DC Highway Safety Office to pilot an intelligent speed assist system in 10 of our vehicles. These monitors prevent vehicle operators from exceeding the posted speed limit, which greatly reduces the risk of a severe collision. Affordability benefits passengers and the industry, and for the first time in 12 years, DFHV increased taxicab fares to help promote stability and fair competition in the market. While the new fares represent a small increase for passengers, they are still cheaper than private rideshare rates on average and encourage a greater number of drivers to offer more responsive and reliable taxi service. In partnership with taxi companies, DFHV continues to operate the Transport DC program for passengers with accessibility challenges, including those who use wheelchairs at a discounted rate, typically $7 flat per ride, which is substantially cheaper than other on-demand, non-shared for-hire options. With regard to accessibility, DFHV continues to push for improved service for those who require a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, or WAV. One WAV option is a traditional taxi trip. Because most requests for a WAV taxi come through dispatch and not hailing a vehicle on the street, a fundamental step forward toward better WAV taxi service is growing the number of drivers who use electronic hailing, or e-hail. In FY24, e-hail trips grew by 8%, exceeding DFHV's 5% goal. Our recent WAV pilot program confirmed the need for this dispatchability and also identified gaps in service. We are about to launch the second iteration of this pilot, and in addition to several other incentives, we hope to recruit and pay more drivers to be on duty during the evening and late night hours. These efforts are in addition to the Transport DC program I mentioned, which in FY24 provided 100,000 discounted trips, including 12,000 WAV trips. On slide 3 and 4, our agency is made up of several divisions who work diligently to deliver our mission. And you can see our agency structure in the organizational chart. I'm going to highlight a few of our divisions now that I have not yet mentioned. Client Services is the front door to our agency, providing courteous and efficient in-person and remote services such as licensing and renewals and permitting. In FY24, our complaints team resolved a total of 361 complaints against public and private for-hire services. The Information Technology Division plays an essential role in keeping the agency and stakeholders abreast of market trends that make trips easier to track with modernized meters, digital roof lights, and access to digital applications for e-hailing and reservations. Our public-facing data portal is updated on a monthly basis and includes valuable information and data points for passengers. In addition to ensuring for-hire services follow the regulations, our performance team also manages targeted programs that combined provided more than 36,000 rides in FY24. And last year, DFHV expanded its public affairs team to communicate with external and internal audiences. The team helps organize monthly taxi driver meetups. It hosted the DFHV Champions of the Road recognition ceremony commemorating the service of drivers. And more recently, the team worked alongside federal and local partners for 2 national special security events, such as the presidential inauguration, to communicate with the public about security perimeters, road closures, alternative pickup and drop-off zones, and protests. The division also rolled out the Did You Know campaign, a series of short informational videos highlighting a range of topics regarding passengers' rights, filing complaints, acceptable payment options, and claiming lost property. On slides 5 and 6, looking ahead, DFHV will perform its core functions of regulation, compliance, and enforcement, while also supporting the industry through programs and partnerships. We believe a for-hire landscape with a range of options for passengers and a balanced regulatory framework is best able to meet the district goals of accessibility and wheelchair service and the reduction of carbon emissions. DFHV is planning for the future as we aim to involve with the growing food and parcel delivery industry and as we contemplate the best possible version of the School Connect program. I'd like to discuss a few of these goals in more detail to illustrate how we plan to continue serving the district. On slide 7, first and foremost, I would like to emphasize that the focus of for-hire regulations lies too heavily with taxis. The trend has been clear as we arrived at taxis accounting for only 5% of the total for-hire trips occurring in the district in 2024, while private rideshare companies, or transportation network companies, TNCs, conduct the remaining 95% of trips. This fact has far-reaching implications, and I will share how it hinders many of our shared goals, such as accessibility and sustainability. On slide 8, our collective goal is a city with accessible transportation. So let's look at the options in the district for a person who uses a wheelchair. Our public transit system, WMATA or Metro, consisting of bus and rail service, is designed with accessible stations and vehicles. But to supplement that service, WMATA provides the Metro Access Program for people unable to use the bus or rail due to a disability. Metro Access completed 316,000 trips originating in the district in 2024, and 13% of those trips, 41,080, were completed in WAVs. To further enhance accessibility, DFHV offers a similar service called Transport DC, which provided 100,000 rides in the district last year, with 12% or 12,000 of those rides also in WAVs. Both Metro Access and Transport DC rely on partnerships with taxi companies to provide these services, including WAV trips. Too often, this conversation focuses only on the red sliver you see in the pie chart, which represents traditional taxi trips charging the standard metered rate to passengers. While that portion of the pie represents a significant 11,000 WAV trips in FY24, it's a strong reminder that taxis, who are only 5% of the industry, are providing up to half of the WAV service. On slide 9, I've shown taxis provide more than their fair share of WAV service, but we don't dispute that gaps in service exist and that there's room for improvement. A particular pain point is with the evening and late night service. And as you can see on this slide, the highest demand for service and completed trips is during midday. And despite less demand in off-peak hours, there aren't enough WAV taxi drivers on duty at these times. DFHV focused on this problem and others in our WAV pilot programs. From June to December 2024, we offered taxi WAV drivers an additional $35 to be on duty after 6 p.m. This attracted 6 new drivers from 2 taxi companies to participate. We also offered a hotline for customers to use that connected them to the taxi company with the nearest WAV. The hotline did not prove to be popular and did not add enough late night service. After further strategizing with taxi companies, DFHV designed the second iteration of the pilot, which will launch in early spring. It will include more incentives to recruit new drivers, eliminate fees, enhance pay for late night hours, and support the cost of WAV maintenance. On slide 10, the final point I'll make on improving accessible transportation in the district is that focusing on taxi service is the wrong unit of analysis. Again, taxis provide only 5% of for-hire trips. For-hire vehicles are only one transportation option in the district or in the system, but play an important role. Taxis are delivering at least 23,000 WAV trips per year, yet they are the only segment of the industry subject to a law requiring a percentage of their fleet be WAVs. Unfortunately, this law uses the wrong metric. You can see that as the taxi industry has shrunk, despite the percentage requirement ramping up, the actual number of WAVs even required has decreased. We believe a better aimed metric for the industry, and not just taxis, would be a measure of customer wait time for a requested WAV pickup rather than a fleet-related metric or requirement. On slide 11, DFHV is committed to Mayor Bowser's sustainable DC goals for transportation, and as such, we've paid close attention to Council's DC Clean Energy Omnibus Act mandate that 50% of the taxi fleet be zero emissions by the year 2030. Today, only about 4% of taxis operating in the district are electric vehicles. So DFHV is exploring options to support charging infrastructure and the transition of vehicles to meet this goal as we connect taxi companies with industry practitioners who have begun the transition in other markets. It bears repeating that taxis account for 5% of the for-hire trips and a similar amount of vehicle miles traveled. No such requirement is mandated for the private for-hire industry. Companies such as Uber and Lyft need only to share regular reports of their plans to reduce emissions, which the Department of Energy and Environment has yet to receive. The disparity here is obvious and problematic. On slide 12, in FY25, DFHV will implement the Carrier for Hire Oversight and Enforcement Amendment Act of 2024, which establishes a new category of for-hire service known as carriers for hire. These are services that transport food, parcels, or beverages for compensation, such as DoorDash or Uber Eats. DFHV has been collaborating with these operators and ensuring compliance under existing emergency authority and will continue to do so under an expanded framework. We are working internally on our implementation plan to determine what regulatory requirements will be necessary and how to carry out fair enforcement. On slide 13, the DC School Connect program had another successful school year in 23-24, and the trend has continued today in school year 24-25. In FY24, a total of 57,431 trips were completed successfully and without incident. DFHV has been an active member in the required working group led by the Deputy Mayor for Education to consider the relocation of the School Connect program, and we expect a valuable report will be available to Council this spring. And on slide 14, in conclusion, thank you for allowing us to share DFHV's perspective on these important issues. I'm proud of the DFHV team and thankful for the trust of our customers and stakeholders. We are committed to monitoring our progress and improving where necessary. We look forward to further collaboration with the Council and our stakeholders, and I'm confident that under Mayor Bowser's leadership, we will keep our promise to deliver safe, affordable, and accessible mobility in the district. Thank you for your time and attention, Councilmember Nadeau and members of the committee. I'm happy to address your questions at this time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are the MyRides and non-emergency medical transport programs funded and planned to continue into the next fiscal year?
Thank you for the question. Those programs are partnerships we have in place with sister agencies. And so the decision about, all the aspects of the programs really lie with those host agencies, like Department of Behavioral Health for MyRides, and FEMS for the non-emergency medical transport. And so those programs are funded currently, and I expect those host agencies to want to continue them in future fiscal years as they have in the past. But really, DFHV plays sort of an intermediary role there where we receive through MOU funding from those agencies and connect them with the vendor providers of the actual transportation, which is taxi companies in these cases.
And do you track metrics for those or those programs or for those agencies?
More so in outputs and like, for accounting purposes, making sure the rides are happening and the reimbursement is happening for the taxi companies. But in terms of, sort of the broader programs that those, or the broader outcomes that those programs are designed for, for example, My Rides serves people who need treatment for substance abuse issues. We're not really looking at sort of the outcomes of the program in that way, but just sort of the operations of the program.
Thank you. What is the role of the DGS employee being detailed to DFHV starting in March?
So I think it's actually the reverse. There was an employee
Until March.
from DFHV that was detailed to DGS.
Got it.
Temporarily.
Got it.
But they've returned to DFHV.
And what was that task?
At DGS. I don't know specifically, and this may involve some personnel matters that I, may not be able to speak on. But the person is back. It was a temporary role, and the person's back at DFHV.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between agency overtime and Vision Zero overtime pay?
Sure. Maybe the more simple one is just the agency overtime category. That's pretty much traditional overtime we pay. This is mostly for our enforcement division, and that's just for activities that fall outside their normal tour of duty, like additional hours they might have to work mostly. The distinction between that and the Vision Zero overtime pay, the source of the Vision Zero overtime is actually from the DC Highway Safety Office through a NHTSA grant from USDOT, it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And those activities need to be strictly related to sort of broader traffic safety enforcement, as opposed to some of the other activities VIOs, regularly conduct that may be more specific to for-hire regulations. And so that's really why we draw the distinction, because the Vision Zero budget, shouldn't be used, for example, necessarily to write a violation for somebody who, isn't displaying the trade dress on their vehicle for hire. It's more like obstructing a crosswalk or dangerous driving. And so those are the only eligible activities for the Vision Zero pot of funding. And so that's why we sort of draw a very clear line between the two, and have to track and differentiate when officers are doing one activity or the other.
Okay, so you only draw from that pot when they're working overtime so that you can track.
Right,
Okay.
right. Like, yeah, we wouldn't be able to intermingle the funding.
Correct. During the day, during their salaried
right,
hours. Okay.
right.
And how long has that overtime funding been used for VIOs?
I might have to check with my staff, but this is, several years now. It's definitely not the first year. And I remember it from my time in the deputy mayor's office as well. So it's become a regular part of what the VIOs do, and how we contribute to the Vision Zero initiative since 2022, I'm being told.
Okay.
Likely.
Anthony Flood was signed up to testify today, but didn't end up participating. He earned over $40,000 in overtime in FY24. Why was that so high compared to any other officer?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's really a one-time anomaly, but reflects sort of the staffing we had at the time, and really his individual willingness to take advantage of the overtime opportunities. It's my understanding that he was at the assistant chief level, and so I believe at the time we had 3 of those, and he was sort of the most ambitious about taking advantage of those opportunities. But I think another reason we don't expect to see an outlier like that in the future is probably around the time he departed the agency. Actually, I think since July, we've had a more formal system of offering and assigning overtime. We use Salesforce for that. And I think it really does provide, a more fair opportunity for people, VIOs, to be aware of the overtime opportunities in the first place and really document, who was offered, who volunteered for it, to make sure it's assigned equitably and, dispersed throughout the division. Yeah, I don't expect to see, an outlier like that in the future.
Do you work with the Highway Safety Office to participate in traffic safety checkpoints or other initiatives?
Not to my knowledge, specifically for a checkpoint. Among other things, I think they're primarily looking for impairment, but they often find lots of other violations at those checkpoints. So I don't believe, I think we provide assistance at times, but thank you for asking. I think I'd like us to take advantage of those opportunities more in the future. I know personally, when I've observed them in the past, I believe within the last year, I did oversee or observe some enforcement related to some of the things that are in DFHV's purview now, including motor-driven cycles or mopeds, and carriers for hire, and people noticing failure of registration or even helmet usage, those sorts of things. So I think they are a good opportunity to encourage compliance with our many safety rules.
Thank you. Why are collections from the passenger surcharge so inconsistent from month to month? In the chart that you shared, some months there's no revenue and some months it's more than $200,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this relates to the surcharge that is required for every taxi trip in the district, and that's now a 50-cent charge. I think there are two reasons. Some are some wrinkles that I think we can improve upon in sort of the accounting and reporting timing that happens between the companies, DFHV and OCFO. And the other reason is, these taxi companies are very lean in their operations. And so, it's a struggle, honestly, for them to be on top and hit every deadline for the many tasks, like administratively, they're doing. So there's some, little quirks of the fiscal year, I think, where, again, because of the timing of reporting, like the first October in the fiscal year might show sort of an undercounting of that surcharge revenue coming in, and then it's actually makes the following month look inflated because it sort of got combined.
Got it.
And so I think those are issues we can improve upon, just figuring out the frequency that avoids, that glitch. I think, for the year, it's all accurate, and but yeah, it's just the appearance because of that timing looks a little spiky. And then I think too, again, because of operations at the taxi companies, like we have seen where they had complications and may have fallen behind in reporting, or actually delivering the revenue, but then they catch up, and that can be a lump sum payment in some cases. So we try to show flexibility where it makes sense, but yeah, it doesn't look consistent month to month for some of those reasons.
How is the surcharge transmitted to DFHV?
I believe it's just a wire transfer in most cases, and often we get the reporting data on that, but the transfer actually goes
To the Treasury.
Right, to the Treasury.
Yeah. And what month did the 25-cent increase in the passenger surcharge go into effect?
That was in August 2024.
There was an FY24 contract for secret shopper anonymous riders that didn't see any spending. Is that program still going on?
We are pursuing a similar program. The reason that contract, it had no invoicing to us or spending, because basically the vendor wasn't able to deliver the services we were looking for. And so, if it's not clear, that's anonymous riders, sort of sampling all the for-hire services that are out there to be undercover and make sure no violations are happening, like discrimination or funny business with fares or anything like that. But what we've learned we need to be even more specific about what activities we want people to do and what kinds of services. We want them to be testing out, like we've actually included things like service animals and, you know, looking out for geographic discrimination, things like that. And so unfortunately, the first vendor we partnered with just simply wasn't able to deliver on that. And so we terminated that contract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you please walk me through the plans for the rewrite of Title 31 of the DCMR?
Sure. It's a big priority for the agency. And I guess to put it simply, we're thinking about it in two parts. So the part one is imminent and should be leaving DFHV's office, you know, within a number of weeks. And that's really sort of an update and cleanup. I don't believe Title 31's had an overhaul in several years. And so there's a lot of sort of outdated things, you know, as the regulations and industry have evolved, things have been tacked on. And so there's, you know, discrepancies to clean up, updates to make. And that's what part one will be focused on, you know, none of which should be very controversial, I wouldn't think. Then part two, you know, I think will require some more public input, but will be the more substantive changes that I think are required to sort of modernize our regulations in line with, you know, the direction that the industry has moved in. Really, you know, really bringing it into our modern times, and you know, a lot of sort of the leveling the playing field ideas that I alluded to in my testimony. Things like that would be in this part two rulemaking.
How many vacant seats are there for for-hire vehicle advisory council?
There are 4 vacant seats on the FHVAC, as we call it. There is one's required to be a district resident a driver basically, who operates a for-hire service. And then another representative from a company that does for-hire service, and then 2 representatives from the hospitality or tourism industry. And so those are the vacancies right now.
Are those all mayoral appointees?
Yes.
How likely are they to be filled within the next few months?
I think we can push for that because, you know, you can see those are important perspectives to have on the council. So I would say it's certainly possible we can make more progress on that. I mean, honestly, we haven't been demanding or, you know, really pushing hard to fill them because the council is functioning and meeting. And I guess I'll say, I mean, the focus of a lot of what we've discussed on the council, you know, is kind of what I just talked about, like how can we best position the agency and our rules to support the industry to sort of keep pace with the change that's happening in the industry, you know, make sure service is effective and safe, affordable, and equitable for and accessible for our passengers, but also make sure we're meeting drivers' needs and company needs. And so a lot of that's kind of the theme of what we often talk about. But even more specifically, I think, you know, our agendas when we meet are more in the way of the agency updating the council on what we've been doing, what our priorities are, you know, how we're pursuing all those goals, and you know, them sort of reacting to that information as opposed to you know, them having a set agenda that they need information from the agency. But I do think hiring some of those vacancies or filling some of those vacant seats would probably, you know, help them form, you know, their agenda for the year, for example. So
Those don't have to be confirmed by DC Council.
I'm not positive about that, but I don't believe so.
I don't remember ever voting to confirm one, but that could be. I could just be forgetting.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And what has the or hire, how did you say it? FHVAC?
FHVAC.
FHVAC. Makes more sense. What have they been focusing on over the past year?
Yeah, just really, you know, how we can support the taxi industry. You know, I think there's often ample focus on the taxi segment of the industry because this is sort of a vestige of the DC Taxi Cab Commission. And, so that's why the council is required in law. But it's sort of less, it doesn't resemble how the commission functioned, where in those meetings in the past, they would be very heavily attended by drivers because the commission would be voting on, like what the taxi fares should be or something like that. So this is much more advisory in nature. So it really is more sort of, talking about policy, sharing ideas. And I think given that it still does have strong participation, knowing that, it's not a commission voting on what the rulemaking is going to be, for example, but it's talking about how we can, like I said, keep pace with the evolving industry, anticipate those changes, thinking about how new technology and new models of service will affect passengers and drivers. So that's kind of the general themes of most of those meetings.
And how many vacancies are there on the Accessibility Advisory Council?
So it's the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Committee? Okay.
AAC. We don't have the most catchy acronyms in our agency, but so the AAC is a little different because those appointments aren't actually mayoral appointments either. And the AAC is a bit more independent, I would say. Like it's really the AAC's committee. So we do have, in general, that committee I'm really thankful for because it's functioning really strongly and has high participation. We have a new chair, as of a few meetings ago, but it's sort of the responsibility of the committee to nominate the participants. And so there are several agencies that are required. And I think we have pretty regular participation from all of them, even if the person who attends hasn't been like nominated and confirmed, I guess, within the committee as that agency's official representative. But this is what, we talk a lot about Transport DC in this committee. We've talked a lot about WAV service and the pilots, and some other issues around accessibility. So, but it's really my sounding board and kind of main source of feedback for what that group of our constituents is experiencing, where they think we can improve. We definitely hear plenty about that, but also where they think we're doing well. So it's a really valuable group, and I'm thankful it's functioning so highly.
So they're two very different kinds of things.
Yeah, the AAC is much more focused just on the issue of accessibility and sort of all the members' experience and knowledge of how those issues are going. We also have really good participation in those meetings from the industry as well. So taxi companies have participated, and it's really transparent. Like they've explained sort of what the economics and financials look like for them in terms of like procuring WAVs in the first place, sort of like what the factors they see with incentives and, reasons why drivers might be available or not. They've shared their side of the story basically. TNCs like Uber and Lyft have also participated. I think in our last meeting, we talked a lot about, how they ensure discrimination isn't happening within their services. And there was kind of some concern around the service animal services they do provide to people who have a service animal, and the very important distinction between that and versions of Uber and Lyft that like there's, I think it's called Uber Pet, where if you want to take your pet dog, in a ride, you can request that and find a driver who is willing to do that through those services. But that's very different than what the ADA requires, and that they cannot refuse a ride because someone has a service animal. So that I thought that was really enlightening, and for both sides, conversations like that to understand what their rules are, how they hold their drivers accountable, how they communicate the difference between those things to their drivers. So yeah, I think those meetings have been great.
That's great. And how many staff cover each of the committees, or the committee and the council?
It's probably around 5 for both. And more work, I think, on the AAC side. We sort of help facilitate the meetings, even though it's, the committee setting the agenda. So that, there's a lot of data prepared there. It's more logistical preparation, I think, for the council, the FHVAC. And, I give prepared remarks, and we hear a message from the chairman of the council as well. But like I said, then it just kind of gets into updates from the agency, which, we already have that information on hand for other purposes. And it's really just an update often.
Got it.
But it's probably the
same 5 staff.
Yeah, those same
Yeah.
5 people are doing both. There's often a lot of overlap.
Okay. Speaking of WAVs, why do you think there wasn't much use of the WAV hotline?
Well, I've gotten lots of feedback about it. And, I can connect you with lots of participants who have strong opinions about it.
I don't think you need to.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say because I want to be fair. I think the hotline itself, we assumed maybe that it would be really beneficial and sort of more efficient and a time savings for a caller or a customer in need of a WAV, instead of having to individually reach out to taxi companies with no knowledge of how many WAVs that company might have on the road at any time or where those WAVs might be. We basically did a cheap version of centralized dispatch. That was our perception of the hotline, where okay, we will pull the information from these companies, and this automated hotline is you tell it what ward you're in or zip code, it will tell you which company has the closest WAV and connect you directly to that company, which in theory should better your chances of getting a faster trip. I think what the participants would tell you is, I think they felt misled by that a bit, because it sounded like a guarantee that, they told me Yellow Cab has the closest WAV. And now when I'm connected to the dispatch at Yellow Cab, it felt like they were starting from scratch, and the dispatch is telling them, okay, you need a WAV. We're going to make that request of the WAVs on duty. And it, for various reasons, maybe the trip that was accepted what wasn't going to happen as quickly as the customer would have hoped. So I think they got some, false hope that the hotline told me, yes, there's a WAV for you, and this is the closest one. It doesn't say it's 6 minutes away or something like that. But then once they were connected with the company, it was sort of, starting over and seeing what the company then told them was available.
Yeah.
So there shouldn't, most of the time, it shouldn't be the case where once they were connected to the company says, oh, we have no WAVs. But they are at the whim of the drivers accepting the rides and sort of where they are geographically in the city. I think this gets into the issue of just why wait times are high, or higher than people would like during certain times of day for WAVs in general, where the activity clusters, a lot of it's near like medical centers, like Washington Hospital Center, George Washington Hospital, places like that. And so if you are on the periphery of the district, just naturally, you're not going to have that concentration of vehicles available. And so your wait time's likely going to be higher. And that, that trend is true for all for-hire service, because it clusters where our population is clustered and more, activity is downtown essentially. So I think there was that, experience with the hotline itself. I think I'd have to say ultimately the incentives we were using didn't attract enough new drivers anyway. So, like I said, the 6 drivers who agreed to take calls through this hotline based on the incentives we were providing, only attracted 6 of them. That's probably not a game changer for the passengers. And then it's kind of a vicious cycle where, because demand coming through the hotline wasn't, skyrocketing, the drivers were actually fulfilling other WAV trips. So they're still doing WAV service, just if one, there were days when one call was coming through the hotline, the drivers really weren't content, even though they were getting the incentive, they wanted to do WAV service. They didn't want to sit and wait for a call. So there's that. I was going to make one other point that's escaping me now. We learned about I think because of the reliability and sort of brand loyalty that the customers have, that was another reason they sort of didn't need the hotline. Like if you prefer Transco and you think, you know, they have dependable service,
You're just going to call
yeah,
Transco.
you'll call Transco. And if you don't perceive the hotline as, even if you don't know they have the closest WAV, you know, you're just going to call them because you trust them. So that was sort of another aspect. And in the second iteration, we're not planning to use the hotline. We have talked about maintaining sort of the behind the scenes infrastructure so that you could just go to our website and see these are the closest vehicles from these companies.
And then call that company.
Yeah, because that's actually not expensive to do that because we have such great data on the taxi side.
You have like real-time data on where the taxis are?
Yep. Yeah, when they're signed into their DTS, which is their meter, we know they're on duty and
That's
geographically
interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of our assumption that we're trying to approximate maybe what you're used to in an Uber or Lyft. You know, when you open the app and you can see all these vehicles near you with time estimates. That was the idea behind the hotline. But
Can you tell that they're a WAV, or that's something you'd have to update?
No, we can do that.
Like on the screen?
Yep. Yeah, that's how the hotline worked. Yep.
Oh, so like the hotline was somebody just looking at that back end data?
It was, the technology in the
Not
cloud.
just, but yeah.
Yeah, pulling that data from the companies, querying who's available based on the location you put it. You said, I'm in Ward 2, and they said, okay, company X has the closest WAV. Would you like me to connect you with them? Then it asked, you can still choose any company you want and we'll connect you with them. Like if you don't want company X because you trust company Y, but maybe that was one of the points that if I was going to go with company Y regardless,
I would have just called
why
them.
do I need to call you?
Yeah. If I open up my Curb app, can I select a WAV in there?
I'm almost positive you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that may also be a place that people are
Yep.
hailing from. Oh, you're checking right now. Okay, fine.
Do
Do TNCs have to provide WAV data?
Yes.
At what
sorry,
frequency?
TNCs.
Yeah.
Yeah, TNCs do as well. It's definitely not to the level of specificity that the taxis do. It's really more at an aggregated level, I would say. But we do see total number of trips requested and fulfilled. I think the frequency is annual. And as you were asking, sort of like the real-time data and, sort of we can see the exact route like every taxi took for every trip. So it's nothing like that because that kind of thing isn't required on the TNC side. So they need to report to us annually, just sort of, I guess, like the fulfillment rate somewhat, how many WAV trips were requested, and how many they fulfilled. I think we get it every March roughly.
Yeah. But that's a huge gap.
Yeah. And I mean, keep in mind the fact that that's, somewhat aggregated. Again, we're talking about 95% of all the trips versus the 5% of all trips that taxis do. So yet taxis are doing
pretty big blind spot day to day.
Exactly. And I think, it's accurate to say that it's not only the TNCs, but other services that want to provide WAF service. They have little partnerships with the taxi companies as well. So taxi WAF service kind of, pops up all over the industry and is sort of behind the scenes in some cases. Because, I think it's an obvious challenge for the rideshare companies. If you sign up to drive for Uber, do you have a WAV? Like probably not, so that's a challenge for their business model.
So is that annual data dump, is that true of all the data that you receive from them or just the WAVs?
That sort of the level of specificity is consistent kind of throughout. Like we don't, for example, know license plate numbers for all the vehicles that operate in this region for Uber or Lyft, for example.
And the frequency is a year, or you get more?
That's quarterly.
Quarterly,
Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, it was just very evident to me when I started at the agency as director and learned the sort of amazing thoroughness of the data that we get on taxis. And it's just it's stark the contrast with what we get for hire vehicles. And there's just so many applications and uses that we would like to know to ensure, that things are safe and
Yeah,
fair.
Like what? Just give me one example.
I don't want to criticize ourselves, but I mean, one that comes to mind right off the bat is, we've been questioned about more proactive use of like ATE data, for example. I can remember an inquiry about, social media had flagged like my rideshare company, will go unnamed, driver, and the person looked up their tag. They went to the DMV website, found out that this rideshare driver had a long list of ATE violations and was asking.
Probably because they probably did that because of the ride they had, right? It was
Mhm.
probably
Exactly.
a dangerous ride.
As I recall, he said this person was breaking traffic rules,
Yep.
driving unsafely, wanted to know what the rideshare company or DFHV would do about it. I can say in that case, the rideshare company did act. But that's something like we are able to get that data from DMV because
Yeah.
we know the taxi cab license plate numbers. They're all H tags. We know every one of them. So if a taxi cab is racking up ATE tickets, that's knowable for us.
For
but
sure.
It's
But
not for TNC.
otherwise, like for a TNC, it's just about whether or not the rest of the system works, that, DPW sees it and can impound it or whatever. They don't know that it's a TNC.
Yeah.
It's just another bad driver. So we're losing out on that extra leverage that we have.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Did the TNCs also see that as a problem though, that like there's not accountability for drivers that are giving them a bad name?
I think they recognize it, and the conversations I've had, like they do take action when they know about it.
For sure.
They call it deplatforming, where you remove you from being able to drive. If they found your history, that could be the same for moving violations or whatever the background checks that are done. So it's not as if they don't act when they're aware of it, I think, but I don't know how regularly they're checking. So as an agency, I would like to be able to be more proactive about that. And again, to be fair, like I think we can do more, and I have plans to do that on the taxi side.
Sure.
But that's 5% of the trips.
Correct. Have there ever been any credible privacy issues with the level of specificity you get with taxi data?
I mean, even complaints from the companies or passengers, I'm really not aware of an issue that's ever come up around that. I've never heard a driver, I've done lots of taxi driver meetups. I've never heard anything around like, what's that?
No complaints.
No, not on that issue. They know, like, most of the companies, when you get a receipt, it often has a little map of the route, so the drivers know like their meter has GPS. Yeah, we've never, to my knowledge, the companies have never complained about competitive advantage, that sort of thing. Like it's
Proprietary information.
Never heard that from the taxi companies or the drivers. So it's not really an issue that I know of.
You mentioned in your testimony that the focus and burden of regulations fall heavily on taxi cabs as opposed to TNCs. What do you think the path forward is to address that?
I mean, I'm hoping to find that path in our part 2 of the Title 31 rewrite. But I just think there needs to be consistency, because the activities are pretty similar. I think most reasonable people would agree to that. But there are lots of inconsistencies with what's required of either side. And it's, not even just like big data type things, like simply the requirements for a driver to be, registered as a taxi driver versus a rideshare driver. I think the reasons are, that's why we need a rewrite, is as things evolved and, new services came into be, like rules for those were tacked on, and it probably addressed issues that were more pressing 10 years ago even. But there are all kinds of things I struggled to wrap my head around when I was really diving into this back in May. For example, the fare structure that exists for taxi service
Mm-hmm.
versus ride share. Like, digital dispatch is what ride sharing does. And so probably most people are familiar with, Uber or Lyft is calculating what fare will be charged, and they're allowed to do that however they want, as long as they need to document how they do it, and the passengers provided an estimate. So so there's no bait and switch. You know what you're paying for. There can be, I think, a 20% like variance in the estimated cost because it's still based off time and distance, so it could fluctuate. Whereas, and if a taxi were to do that as digital dispatch, it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
But if a taxi gave you the same exact trip and you hailed it on the street or called it with a telephone, like a landline or something, for dispatch, totally different fare structure, where also based on time and distance, but it's what you would see in the window of the taxi meter, where $4.50, I believe, for the flag drop, like the base fare, and then based on time and distance and other fees from there. But again, it's essentially the same exact service. Thinking about even for taxis, because taxis were eventually offered the digital dispatch option. But if I literally get in the same taxi, if I hailed it on the street, putting my hand up, I would have a different methodology for paying how the fare's collected than if I used Curb, for example, to get that very same taxi, same driver. So there are a lot of examples like that where, it is what it is because of how it evolved. But looking at it, zooming out and looking at it today,
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When you see what is being offered. I saw that Seattle is trying to do some fair regulation of TNCs now, which could be interesting to follow. You highlighted WAV and electrification requirements as problematic disparities between the two sectors. What are the other most glaring disparities? You said fare structure.
Yeah, I think a big one is just the barriers to entry for drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that ends up touching on WAV service, right? Like, we can't have better taxi WAV service if we're losing drivers instead of gaining them. And so I think there are like valid questions to ask again about, why is sort of a more rigorous background check related or required for taxi drivers, requires like an FBI process essentially versus a more basic like criminal background check on the TNC side. Again, when they're doing similar service. And I've heard people support and oppose that on both sides of the industry. But knowing what you have to go through to become a taxi driver, there are a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of processes that they have to go through with the government that makes it faster and easier to sign up to be a rideshare driver instead. Whether that's you need certain vehicle requirements, you need a color scheme on your vehicle. There's lots of investments to make on the vehicle side. The getting your Face ID, which is like your taxi driver license, getting that vehicle inspected through a DFHV, DMV process instead of, as an Uber driver, just showing I have a valid registration for this vehicle I already have. Those are sort of big imbalances, I think, that have real implications for certainly like maintaining the taxi segment and its competitiveness. And, to be clear, I think that's important because the taxi industry really has a history of caring about our DC values, whether it's accessibility, preventing discrimination. I hear from the taxi companies on the WAV issue specifically often that like, we really do care about this. Like, we want to do this service because it's essential for people, regardless of whatever the requirements are. So I really do think they're good partners. And that's why they're the public vehicles for hire. So it's important to have them, in the mix, even if they are going to be a smaller slice of the pie than they were, 15 years ago. I've seen a strong partnership from the companies.
Has the increased taxi fare made any noticeable difference in the economic outcomes for the drivers?
I've certainly heard lots of thank yous. I know the drivers really consider that like they got a raise essentially. And I'm aware, as I think in Seattle, as you alluded to, I saw in New York recently too, like they've had some movement on like minimum wage concepts for the taxi drivers. And I thought of that because I can't tell you, we might be able to approximate like what the actual income on average is for taxi drivers. Like we know the cost of trips, but there are other like variables that play into that, and you know, arrangements they might have, like if they lease their vehicle from the taxi company, if they're on dispatch, they likely pay a dispatch fee. So we don't know their exact take home pay necessarily. But I think it's a good question. I want to think more about like the labor issues on all sides of the industry. But yeah, I've certainly heard gratitude. Like the perception is, you know, neighboring jurisdictions like have had fare increases more recently, so they were definitely thankful that it happened. There are other you know, fees that may exist elsewhere or have existed here that they're also asking for that we didn't do, because we wanted to strike the balance of not actually you know, increasing prices too much for customers, which would ultimately lose business for the drivers and the companies, while, you know, limiting the transportation options. So we're always trying to strike that balance. But I think I mentioned that you know, the increase we did is still very price competitive at average times of the day. You know, certainly when the busier times, when the ride shares are allowed to do their surge pricing, you know, taxis are going to be a cheaper option, almost certainly. So there are those factors as well. But yeah, I really do want to look into more about what you know, how that impacted drivers and, you know, their true take home pay.
So does the fare increase not apply to e-hail?
No.
What percentage of taxi trips are now requested through e-hail?
Unless my staff sends me an update, I'd have to get back to you on the
Not a
exact
problem.
percentage, but I know it's climbing, as I said. There's some interesting quirks behind that too, if you're interested, because I think most people are probably thinking about using an app like Curb or others to request that trip. But some of the growth we've seen is actually through, again, sort of these interesting blends of activities and partnerships where Uber actually has taxi options. I think under UberX, you know, a taxi might actually fulfill that ride.
Okay,
And so
right.
those are some of those e-hail trips actually just coming through Uber. So
I see.
it kind of opened my eyes that to increase e-hailing, it's not necessarily that we need to get any certain like taxi e-hail app, like full saturation and like full awareness, because there's demand out there. And so some of the other operators are willing to fulfill a trip.
They
It's
just
a
move over to
win-win,
the
I think.
platform.
Yeah, like if we can't find you an UberX, like, you know, we're sharing, you know, some of the revenue in, you know, connecting you to a taxi. So yeah. I
Do you think it's
that's-
still important to maintain the taxi livery requirement with the red cab design?
I've heard different takes on that. To me, it's a barrier for entry for drivers. I've heard the argument that, you know, depending on the information you receive, from, you know, from whatever, if you're getting an Uber or a Lyft, for example, you know, you might have a picture of the driver and their name and the license plate. But other than that, you're getting into a stranger's car. Not that I'm criticizing that, but, you know, like
Right.
the expectation from customers doesn't seem to be that a special color scheme is what gives them the confidence that like this is a safe and legitimate operator. You know, apparently most people just, you know, need confirmation. Yes, this is the make and model of the vehicle and the color. Here's the license plate number. So I trust this is the person who, you know, has been deemed safe to transport me. And I've heard the flip side of that too, that no, like that, you know, customers do have trust in that, you know, all those requirements, like, you know, the similar thing for the background checks for taxi drivers, like that actually is an advantage to the taxi industry because people know they're held to this high standard and there are all these requirements. And so they feel safe with that.
Yeah.
There are plenty of other jurisdictions I mean, maybe the majority that have a thriving taxi market that don't have a color scheme requirement. So it's done. You know, there's still, you know, the trade dress concept would likely be there. In the past, even we used to have like a DCTC sort of emblem, you know, because we didn't have a color scheme, I think, prior to 2009 or
Yeah.
around there maybe. So yeah, I can see pros and cons, but I think what stuck with me most firmly is that that's just not what customers demand or expect anymore. There are other ways to confirm that this is the ride that was intended for you. You're not getting in the wrong vehicle, or this is like a totally unregulated vehicle or something. So it's not as, you know, ride sharing isn't as new as it was when the color scheme was instituted. I do like the dome light. I think that is, you know, communicates valuable information. And again, taxis provide service to people. Like there's a, you know, a population of people that maybe don't have a smartphone, like don't want to have their credit card on file with a ride sharing company. So the things that help you still do the old fashioned in-person hailing of a taxi, color scheme could be one of them, you know, that serves those purposes too. So it's not a slam dunk either way, I don't think, but it's definitely been on my mind, like what value does this serve? And we're actually looking into a market survey to ask questions like that, like, do you care if your taxi or rideshare vehicle is red or yellow or nothing? So
That'll be interesting to see the results.
yeah.
Are you familiar with WMATA's new Abilities Ride program?
Yep, I am.
How is it similar to Transport DC?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess first of all, I want to say like some of these things sound redundant and maybe even wasteful, like even in my testimony, but they're really not. Abilities Rides is sort of a variation of Metro Access, and Metro Access is required, you know, by law. It's a supplement and complement to the transit service. It's paratransit is, you know, the technical term, and so WMATA has to offer that. And I think, maybe I'm assuming, but I think along the way they realized there were different models to do what people need Metro Access for, because not every trip is a WAV. And so originally, you know, they had a certain vehicle that they owned in their fleet and probably like a full-time employee driving that vehicle. And they basically, Abilities Rides is a lot like what we do with Transport DC, just recognizing you might not need that expensive, you know, configuration of things. So they actually partner with different fleets, taxi companies as well, because there are plenty of trips, you know, that qualify, but don't actually, you know, require a vehicle that can accommodate a motorized wheelchair, for example. So a Metro Access customer through Abilities Rides, you know, maybe gets to their medical appointment in a taxi, or you know, with a different fleet that they contract with. And so, I mean, the difference between Transport DC and Metro Access, first there's the service area. So everything WMATA does is regional. So we couldn't help you if you want to go from DC to Prince George's County. Transport DC only operates within DC. But other than that, ours is more of a more on-demand, sort of more premium service, because it's not shared. You don't have to book it as far in advance. Whereas Metro Access traditionally, you know, required more advanced booking. I think sometimes is actually shared. So those are some of the differences. I mean, basically the district created TDC, as we call it, Transport DC, because we could simply deliver it cheaper than how WMATA had been operating Metro Access. Just recognizing, you know, that different vehicles were possible. Not every trip needs to be in a WAV. And so that's kind of, the genesis of Transport DC. So people use both. If you're eligible for Metro Access, that's actually how we determine your eligibility for TDC. So you sign up for Metro Access, and then we confirm that with WMATA, and now you're in Transport DC as well.
Okay.
And so people use both. You know, I think it's good to have the options. So,
Sure.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about the implementation of the new carrier for hire loss. So What steps are you taking this year to implement, and what provisions will definitely need new rulemakings?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, we're really doing a lot in the spirit of the law already that, we've been able to do under existing authority. So we're definitely not sitting idle waiting for the law to become effective. And I think a lot of the on-street enforcement activities, we are able to do to one extent or another. But I think some of the, specifics around these companies needs to register with us directly to operate, what additional like explicit requirements might go along with that, the information we want to receive from these companies, that they're not required to do or to provide us with now. Those are the things that are definitely going to have to be in rulemaking. I think we, I guess to give more specifics, like how is trade dress going to work, like that's something that I think those companies have a version of now, but it's more for like branding and advertising. It's not like the official. Our VIOs need to be able to identify a vehicle that's engaged in this activity, and that requires your trade dress in this location, this size, like specifics like that will definitely be in a rulemaking. And we have engaged the companies. We're not just trying to unilaterally decide those things. We're hearing the company's feedback and what works for them. But I think a lot of what we've been doing, thinking about the issues we see on the street, working with our sister agencies like DDOT for, where issues are along the curbside or when enforcement is necessary. If that's something, I guess what version of that we're doing as opposed to maybe even a DPW or an MPD. So yeah, I think we've been learning as we go, seeing what's difficult for our VIOs to identify, where it totally sort of stifles us if the operators of those vehicles just aren't cooperative. In the case of like we've thought a lot about motor driven cycles or mopeds, and just sort of the challenges those vehicles present. Like in the past, we had seen that not as many were even registered in the valid way, or maybe the drivers didn't have a driver's license, which is required. And so, like, what does enforcement look like if those things are the case? Like, you can't write a ticket because there's no tag on this vehicle and the person won't identify themselves. Those are some of the things I think we're thinking through and will need to be spelled out in rulemaking.
That makes sense. Do you have a complete list of companies operating in the district that fall under the definition of a carrier for hire company?
I think not an exhaustive list, but we definitely know the main players and have been in communication with them, throughout thinking about this legislation. So we definitely know, like, have an indication of like the sort of the market share and the largest operators. And we've been in contact with, those several companies. There's surely maybe some smaller ones that, maybe are already here will pop up that I think once the framework is up and running, as usual, like our VIOs are pretty good at spotting for higher activity. And so that's often how we detect new operators in the market. And, if they weren't aware that in the future that they have to register with us, like we inform them accordingly. So yeah, I think we have the majority and sort of the critical mass of operators that we're aware of and are in touch with.
Any difficult edge cases in terms of determining whether they're included in this?
Not really that I'm aware of. I think the, good
Okay.
team effort on the way the law was drafted, because I think it accounted for a lot of, these.
Oh, see, I was going to say no is fine and let you move on,
Yeah.
but then you complimented us, so I had to let you
Yeah,
continue.
no, I mean, not at the moment. There aren't any that we think, like have a loophole of some kind or something. So.
Okay. You talked a bit in your testimony about electrification goals. Are you aware of internal electrification goals that the TNCs have?
I mean, no more aware than anyone in the average public could be, because they do have some information on their websites about their plans. And I think, years like target of 2040, but really I don't about the specifics of how they'll arrive at those goals. The law does require them to submit somewhat regular reports to DC government. Originally, I think it was amended. At first, it was the Public Service Commission, and now it's Department of Energy and Environment. So that may have caused some confusion, but as far as I know from DOEE, DFHV and DOEE need to think about how we can, work with the TNCs to receive that information.
So they're not sending it?
No, not to my knowledge. And so I think it's, there could be a lack of awareness about that requirement. But yeah, I mean, that report would be, very enlightening because like I said, I mean, not criticizing or anything. It's their business model. I think it's a challenge to figure out how, they could approach anything like what the requirements are for our public sector and the taxis, 50%, 75%, 100% of miles traveled or vehicles registered or however you want to measure it. Like that will be a drastic shift in how they operate.
Are the EV taxi requirements feasible to execute given the fact that you're only at 4% and you need to be at 50% in 5 years?
I think it's possible to make a lot of progress.
Didn't we just lose all our funding for charging infrastructure?
I mean, through federal sources that would have been like open to the general public anyway, I believe have taken a hit. Yes. And what we're actually thinking of anyway for hire would be more reserved for those activities. You probably remember years back when there was a somewhat prominent like incentive for the taxi companies to purchase EVs. I think they got a tax credit. And there were, many drivers purchased Nissan Leafs and there just wasn't charging infrastructure for them.
Right. Right.
And so I think since then, they probably weren't wild about the electrification idea. And then, honestly, I've detected, again, some lack of awareness around this requirement in the first place. So I think given, they're at 4% by happenstance somewhat, it's not like anyone's been pushing really hard, I don't think, up until this point.
Yeah.
So that maybe that number's a little lower than it should be already. And we have seen promising approaches, and we actually have mid-March convening planned to connect practitioners, like I said, they're doing this in other markets with our taxi operators. So I'm pretty optimistic about at least making a big leap forward. Like several of the taxi companies, they own facilities in the district that have parking. And
right. So they can have charging overnight.
There's room for charging there, fast charging.
Swapping vehicles.
Yep. And there are companies that actually, electric fleet management companies that will cover the upfront capital expenditures to install that charging and even lease these companies' vehicles. That's what we're seeing with, a couple other taxi operators in other markets. So there's a revenue stream there for that partner, kind of a public-private partnership, if you will. All the investment isn't required, of these struggling companies or the companies saying, hey, your car is legal today, but, it doesn't have too many miles or it's not too old, but you need to go buy an EV. Like, there's a group of taxi drivers who may retire instead of doing that.
Sure.
And so a lot of the activity.
It's also not necessarily super environmentally friendly to like junk a working vehicle.
Yep.
Yeah.
But a lot of these models actually, the drivers are leasing the vehicles. And I actually think that creates a new pipeline for new drivers because maybe I can't afford to finance or buy
a new EV.
A vehicle new, but
yeah,
if charging and leasing is all built into my agreement with the taxi company and it's easy for me to become a taxi driver, then maybe.
How many miles does a taxi average on a daily basis?
Ooh, I think we've looked at this recently. 18, apparently, I'm told.
Okay. Well, that's a slightly different conversation.
Yeah.
Because most smaller EVs can give you a couple hundred miles on an overnight charge.
We are a good jurisdiction for this because we don't cover the geography, like Dulles Airport or DCA, maybe like those are long trips.
Sure. But even that.
Yeah.
How many of those can you even put in a day?
Right, exactly. And the hours that the average taxi driver, the average is probably skewed. There are taxi drivers that aren't working 8 hours a day anyway.
Yeah. So we're not really talking about a lot of drivers who are going to need to top up in the middle of their shift.
80% of trips are under 2 miles.
Yeah.
And like
And
you
you're
said,
not, and
there's
there's not a lot of variation in city
Right.
driving in terms of how much you're burning down your battery. So
yeah, only so many of those trips happen a day. Maybe you do have to
you're
drive
not
it in and
losing any
out.
energy when you're idling. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, there's other benefits too. I mean, the EVs have less maintenance costs. Like there are plenty of
Mhm.
things that are attractive to a driver,
Yeah.
a professional driver.
so then charging facilities where the fleet is stored is actually probably the answer. It's not as much about charging on the go.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on how far the drivers may be commuting in to get into DC, a lot of our taxi companies are located, there's like Bladensburg Road, Benning Road, kind of like northeast,
Mhm.
several of them. So that's kind of on the way, into where the taxis would be heading.
Mhm.
So if you were to, charge there in the morning, fast charging again, so this is going to be 15, 20 minutes, hopefully to top up to 80% or
Oh, because
something.
they're take-home vehicles?
They could be, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, right now that's the norm.
Got it. Okay.
They're not, many of them are not EVs, but a lot of the drivers own their
Uh-huh.
vehicles. But yeah, if you were leasing it, yeah, it could be, you probably would still take home your lease vehicle, could be at the taxi company. And then I think if there were a central hub somewhere
Yeah.
for the people who need to charge more, and that would really cover things. I
Are
think.
we able to fund installation of charging facilities at a driver's private residence if it's outside DC?
Hmm. I've not looked into that. I think if it were capital budget, that'd be an issue.
Yeah.
We're not improving an asset that we own.
Well, we wouldn't be at the facilities either.
Right. Hence the partnership ideas where they, have somebody else covering that cost.
Got it.
We can incentivize.
Yeah,
it.
just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at some special events stuff, have new operations around the arena downtown added any pressure for overtime spending?
I wouldn't say pressure. We're active there. And I think we're actually learning from our activities in that area when it comes to, I mean, mainly we're there to help with traffic congestion and traffic safety. But the pickup drop off activity, is kind of our big role.
Okay.
And there's actually some designated, curb space that we have that combines TNCs and taxis, where we direct that activity to avoid, disruption to the flow of things. And that, I think that's an approach that should be considered elsewhere. And that's kind of what we're testing out.
So okay. So that is mostly covered by regular shifts then, special events down by the arenas?
Yeah, I believe so. It's become more of our normal deployment.
Okay.
But as needed, like that could be an example of where we use our regular overtime.
Okay. Revenue from special events has gone from 56,000 in FY21 to over $1 million in the last 2 fiscal years. What explains the increase?
So just to clarify, when a special event is happening, DFHV offers special event permits to, different kinds of drivers who might want to temporarily, like inauguration's an easy one. Like
So registration for a special event as a
so
driver.
it's like temporary, authority to operate. Maybe I own a limo in Pennsylvania and I want to be here for
Right. I think you've
inauguration.
mentioned this before.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a credit to our NDL program, non-district limo, where it's flexible like that. You don't have to reside and have your vehicle registered here, which many don't. And so that's a more permanent thing, but the same idea for the special event permits. We let people deliver that service here and it generates revenue.
Does DFHV determine how much to charge for special event reimbursements for each application? Or is that handled by HCMA or Special Events Task Group?
I mean, yeah, for the event itself, that permitting isn't related to DFHV, but we determine those permits to operate like for hire services and what fees come along with those.
Okay. We heard a lot of testimony today about School Connect. In FY24 and this fiscal year to date, there have been over $1.5 million reprogrammed for School Connect. 2 of those 4 reprogrammings were indicated as being urgent. What was the cause of those reprogrammings and why did it get to the point of being so urgent?
Yeah, I think generally when we have to, move budget around like that, it's really reflecting our desire and I think, success in being flexible and adapting where the program needs to. I think that particular reprogramming was related to how we obtain our drivers. And so we've done a mix of things where we've done the contracting route with a vendor to provide drivers, and we've done grants to taxi companies whose drivers need more employment to drive for School Connect.
Oh,
And so simply that requires reprogramming to go from like the contractual to grants budget line items. I guess I wouldn't, we weren't in, it wasn't urgent in that like there's a lack of planning for it or, I don't know, there's a gap of some kind. It was more that the sooner we do this, the better, because we're saving money if we do it this way, and we're then able to provide more trips for students. And I think some of it really was, in response to the performance we were seeing from those vendors. Some require like minimum hours of like daily hours of service that they're looking for each of their drivers. And the School Connect sort of driver role isn't necessarily an 8-hour day, so where we detect inefficiencies like that, we try to find, a more efficient and, cheaper source of the same good service we're able to find. And that's where we've had to move budget around to do that. So.
that makes sense. In the fall, there was a new notice of funding availability of $385,000 for School Connect. What was that for?
For School Connect. That one's not ringing a bell off the top of my head. It may have been related to procuring drivers, though, would be my assumption. I'm sorry, though. I'd have to check back on that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's drivers.
Drivers,
Yeah.
okay. And can you talk about your role in the DME working group on School Connect and how you think, any recommendations you think we're going to see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get ahead of the report. I think I was personally there for the first 3 meetings. I think I missed the final one. But I thought it was valuable, and it was, I think in the spirit of the requirement, it was like a very neutral, sort of zoomed out look at what School Connect is, how potentially other, communities and jurisdictions tackle some of these issues. I think I somewhat already knew this, but like our education landscape is pretty unique, the governance of it and, the options, how that factors into the city we live in and the transportation options we have. So I don't think we found much of an apples to apples, like, well, this jurisdiction, they're targeting these public safety issues, and they have this landscape of school and transportation, and they have a program like School Connect, to target, public safety in school transportation. So I don't think there were a lot of, panaceas we found like elsewhere, but I think it really did look at, well, what is the scope of the program? I think it took an honest look at, the scope questions, because that's what I hear a lot about, aside from where the program should live within the government. We heard today, like the need is real for it, and
Yeah.
people are satisfied, like they feel the benefit of the program. So obviously
Right.
people want to participate. So there was a ample consideration of adjustments to the scope and different models of delivering it, regardless of where it resides. And like you said, one of the points about sort of having more school leadership, I think, one of the ideas that appealed to me, not saying any one approach is necessarily a home run, but that our methodology for receiving applications to the program and which students end up with a seat, is mostly a function of there is priority, like based on safety information and the safe passage zone priority areas. But then within that, we have a logistical task to take kids from various origins, create these micro stops and get them to the schools they need to go to on time. And so that dictates some of who actually gets a seat in the program. And I think that's pretty different than a school saying these 10 kids are the most needy. Like a school may be able to say that.
Yeah.
Where we can. And I think in reality, if you did it that way, you might serve fewer students total because they probably don't live in, perfect next door neighbors where we can pick, those 3 kids up and take them to the same school. Like that's kind of the puzzle that the routing has to solve. But yeah, topics like that, I think I was happy to hear and learn more about and those types of considerations. But I do think the report is going to have options of, sure, there are other agencies that could probably inherit this program, and here are pros and cons and sort of, the projected benefit or cost to doing that. So I hopefully the report gets at what council was looking for.
Great. Thank you. Want to talk to you about VIOs for a bit. How many promotions were there for VIOs in the last year?
I don't know specifically. It might come to me from a team member.
That's fine. Do you have any response to Joey Davis's concerns about capricious promotion criteria?
Yeah, it was a little, obviously I don't want to hear that that's the perception among our team. There's a split, I guess, just for context. Not all the VIOs are union members, and I think I've done a good job of making myself available to the union representative that's in the enforcement division. Hadn't spoken with Joey much other than maybe a few emails. So, and even recently we had an opportunity to really like air concerns, of that sort. I think some of what he said may have been blending a couple things that are happening, like where he was mentioning the carrier for hire work and potentially like requiring different roles. I think he mentioned like becoming a sworn officer, whether that would be required to impound like carriers for hire. That's all very like conceptual at the moment, and it's actually not related to implementing the carrier for hire law. We actually had an opportunity presented to us from the Highway Safety Office just in general about expanding VIO authority to be more like, a sworn officer. Again, they would have to be performing, that would be for the purposes of general traffic safety enforcement. And so honestly, I think the only reason the union representatives know about that opportunity is because we directly asked the whole enforcement division through a survey, what do you think about that idea? In some of the venues I had received feedback from the team, I did hear that concern, even as it relates to today, that some people perceive, it's just a different activity with a different group of operators, and maybe they feel it carries more risk than what they do with like passenger service vehicles for hire. Or other, I heard the same thing, that others sort of welcome the expanded scope. They want more overtime opportunity. They think we're the right agency to police this activity, and they're sort of out there doing it. So I don't think the for hire or the carry for hire enforcement necessarily has to mean net more hours worked or something, like actual expansion of the volume of what's being done. It's different activity for sure. So we're not far down a path at all of requiring, and we've never planned to require VIOs to become sworn officers, be armed, anything like that. It's really a consideration we asked because there's funding potentially available for it. In terms of just like the promotion potential, I think there are valid concerns, and I will think more about external hires versus internal. I will say that there is no one on our team at any level that's not qualified to do the job. Like whether we found a person that had been working at DDOT prior, which is one case, or private sector or something, like we don't hire people that aren't fully capable and informed of their duties. they may not have risen through the ranks. We have VIOs that have been at the agency for 20 years. So that, it is a difference, someone coming in from the outside than someone who's been promoted, all the way up the ladder, which we do want to see happen. And I think we do have examples of. So, I plan to reach out to Joey because I think they're important questions, and we want the division to, have that promotion potential, like be equitable. So I know there's some concerns there, and I'll definitely look into them.
Do you know how many officers have left the VIO team this year?
I will await a response.
And
five
also,
last year.
while you're doing that, the weekly attendance rate for VIOs in FY24.
I believe 5 left the agency last year. I will say we do have, in my experience in DC government, I feel like we fill vacancies pretty quickly. So there is some turnover, but we also get those positions posted and hired pretty efficiently. What was your second question, sir?
The weekly attendance rate for VIOs in FY24.
Okay. Yeah, that one I'm not positive of.
Yeah, and then the other one that's still remaining is how many promotions in the last year for VIOs.
Okay, we can definitely get that to you.
We'll ask, we can follow up.
Yeah.
Can you speak more to the meeting you had with MPD about procedures for impounding mopeds?
So yeah, actually Travis Nemhard, our enforcement division chief, led that meeting, but really it was to sort of learn from their experience that they've had in the past, where we had more of a push, I think over last summer, when we really saw the proliferation of those vehicles and issues with them complying to basic rules. I know we actually have, I think even going beyond that conversation, we've sort of been, experimenting with things in the field, such as where we see mopeds congregated in a place they shouldn't be, making announcements from the PA system in the cruiser of the VIO in both English and Spanish, just explaining like you can't be on the sidewalk parked. You're obstructing the sidewalk, or even in the street, you're parked, in an unsafe way. So I know there's probably more to it. Like I said, some of those interactions, like what DFHV is legally able to do. I often think about, the case of where someone's just not being cooperative, and our traditional like ticketing, isn't an option because their vehicle doesn't have the information on it to write that notice of infraction. Or, we're not able, often VIOs write moving violations as well. But if, say, a moped operator doesn't have a driver's license and they're not going to identify themselves, then, that limits their options. And so I think a lot of those issues are what DFHV was learning from MPD and their experience in that convening.
Great. Are there any positions you're prioritizing hiring for right now?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind is our chief performance officer. I think that's the most obvious to me when I think about our org chart. And we are in the recruitment process for it. And I think we're nearing the end of the process. So yeah, that's an important one.
Great. Those are all the questions that I have for you today, and I appreciate your responsiveness. I'm going to do a 5-minute recess.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we'll be back at 12:46 roughly. Okay, we are back and we are now going to be joined by the Director of the Office of Contracting and Procurement, Nancy Hateman. Director, before you begin, I'm going to administer the oath. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. When you're ready, you may begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Nadeau and members of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. I am Nancy Hateman, Chief Procurement Officer for the District of Columbia. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on the Office of Contracting and Procurement's performance for fiscal year 2024 and 2025 to date. Our mission is to partner with vendors and district agencies to purchase quality goods and services promptly and cost-effectively, ensuring that every procurement action is conducted with fairness and impartiality. In fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 to date, our agency has served as a trusted partner to more than 79 district offices and agencies, managing a diverse acquisition portfolio of goods, services, and construction projects totaling $5.7 billion. In fiscal year 24, we advanced our long-term strategic vision by focusing on two overarching objectives: achieving excellence in contracting and procurement, and achieving excellence in operational support. Our progress is underpinned by a robust framework of processes and a network of professionals who ensure we operate with efficiency, distinction, and transparency. One way we have increased our operational efficiency is by deploying new dashboards that monitor key performance indicators such as contract value and revenue from the surplus property program. These tools empower agency leadership to make well-informed decisions and continuously enhance our processes. Fostering strong relationships with our client agencies is the foundation upon which an effective procurement process is built. This year, we have continued the client engagement activities I highlighted in last year's testimony. These meetings provide valuable insight into agency priorities, allowing us to understand client needs and respond effectively to emerging challenges. I intend to pursue more client engagement activities this year. Robust engagement with our vendor community is essential to fulfilling our mission. In fiscal year 24, we launched an expanded vendor and client satisfaction survey that features an interactive tool prompting respondents to offer detailed feedback when ratings fall below satisfactory levels. The actionable insights from this survey have been instrumental in identifying areas for process improvement. In fiscal year 25, we introduced a refreshed forecasting module on the Contracts and Procurement Transparency Portal. This improvement provides more accurate and accessible information on upcoming procurement opportunities, thereby enabling vendors to plan their bids or proposals more effectively. OCP has reimagined its DC Buys event in fiscal year 25. OCP's flagship vendor event, now known as OCP Buys, has transformed into a series of focused events organized by the procurement cluster. By filtering vendors by their selected commodity codes, OCP can actively target advertisements to vendors that are most likely to benefit from each OCP Buys event. The new format has enhanced engagement by creating an open house environment that encourages direct dialogue between vendors, agency staff, and agency partners, such as the Department of Small and Local Business Development and the Office of Risk Management. OCP hosted two events in the first quarter: OCP Buys Information Technology and OCP Buys Health and Human Services. Both events received overwhelmingly positive feedback, with post-event surveys indicating positive experiences from attendees and highlighting how the event helped to resolve outstanding vendor questions. OCP also actively partnered and participated in other events, such as the Government Procurement Conference, DSLBD's District Connect, DCHBX's Power Up DC, and DGS's Small Business Procurement event. Additionally, OCP hosted 24 virtual vendor workshops that collectively attracted 1,421 attendees, further demonstrating our commitment to expanding access and delivering critical procurement guidance. Surplus property and emergency response, OCP, our surplus property program, continues to deliver substantial value for the district. In fiscal year 24, the program generated nearly $7.8 million in revenue from the sale of 2,520 lots of surplus property, scrap metal, and other disposal activities. OCP's proactive approach to surplus property reuse has enabled district agencies to source essential supplies and equipment from district and federal inventories, creating cost savings. The program also benefits our community, allowing 151 qualifying nonprofit organizations access to district and federal surplus property. Beyond our standard procurement operations, OCP has also played an active role in supporting district government operations during critical periods. In support of the 60th presidential inauguration, we provided essential procurement assistance to agencies including the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, the Metropolitan Police Department, DC Fire and EMS, and the District Department of Transportation. Our support extended to activations for the general election, the certification of the election on January 6th, and a multi-day activation for inaugural activities. Additionally, OCP has provided critical support for other emergency response activations such as snow emergencies, boil water advisories, the 2024 North Atlantic Treaty Organization Summit, and the tragic aircraft water rescue and recovery operation on the Potomac. These initiatives underscore our ability to deliver rapid, effective procurement solutions in both routine and emergency situations. In summary, our performance in fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 to date reflects steady progress in operational excellence, stakeholder engagement, and process transparency. As we continue to refine our processes and broaden our engagement efforts, the Office of Contracting Procurement remains steadfast in its commitment to delivering fair, transparent, and efficient procurement solutions for all district agencies and the communities we serve. We are grateful for the leadership of Mayor Bowser, City Administrator Donahue, and Assistant City Administrator Rodriguez, who have been instrumental in supporting us through the fiscal year as we serve the district. We also extend our appreciation to Chairperson Nadeau and the members of the Committee on Public Works and Operations for their support and for providing us with this opportunity to testify. This concludes my prepared testimony. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Madam CPO. How many trainings, we're going to start with the public witness questions. How many trainings has OCP conducted in FY 24 and 25 to date for district agencies regarding the Nonprofit Fairness Act?
For fiscal year 25, we have recently met with the members of the Procurement Best Practice Committee and refreshed that with the members of the Best Practice Committee. We also did a similar event in fiscal year 24.
Great. Is that the standard cadence, one a fiscal year?
That has been our standard cadence, but we have also incorporated that into our regular procurement trainings as well. So the ones with the Best Practices Procurement Committee allows us to reach agencies that are not necessarily under OCP's procurement authority as well.
Very good. Okay. Is there a standard onboarding on this, a training on this law that OCP administers for new staff at OCP or agencies?
We have a standard training that we have for onboarding any staff, new staff to OCP, and it's actually a multi-day event, and it includes a broad range of procurement topics, and it includes this as part of the Nonprofit Act as part of that.
Thank you. During last year's performance oversight hearing, you agreed that OCP's standard language should include content that explains that indirect cost rates are intended to apply or be paid in addition to the direct costs associated with providing the contracted services. Has OCP updated this language?
I believe our solicitation clause addresses that. We have a specific clause that we include in all our solicitations.
How has OCP worked with the nonprofit community partners in FY24 and 25 to ensure that nonprofits are aware of their rights under the law?
What we have done in fiscal year 24 and 25 to date, we are part of the group that the Office of the Assistant City Administrator has in meeting with the nonprofit community, and we participate in and engage in those meetings.
Great. We also heard testimony that highlighted a pattern of contract awards just under $1 million, including 30 contracts at $950,000 each, totaling $28.5 million. Could you explain why so many contracts fall just below the $1 million threshold?
In listening to that testimony, those contracts are the DC supply schedule contracts that are awarded as indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. So they have a ceiling. Different schedules, there's 16 schedules that we have within the DC supply schedule, have different ceiling amounts.
Okay.
And the ceiling amount that we are using often is reflective of the usage on the schedule as well. Because if a particular schedule contract is not anticipated to go over $1 million in its usage, it is not going to be prepared for a higher ceiling to send to the council.
Mm-hmm. So what would be an example of one of those that's typically $950,000?
Well, we have a number of them.
Yeah.
And I think even for, let's say, for example, in our temporary staffing or our MOBIS, which is our consulting schedule,
Mm-hmm.
we have many vendors, and because of the number of vendors, we don't have a ceiling that's generally over $1 million because the usage just is not there for a given number of vendors. If the usage on any supply schedule category supported being over $1 million, we would do that and follow the process for council approval.
Mm-hmm. Has your agency conducted any internal audits or reviews to assess whether contract splitting is occurring?
We have not recently done one specifically on contract splitting, but we do, if something raises a question, we will look at it. And we also train the staff on the concept of contract splitting and how that it is not an acceptable practice.
And you said you train staff specifically on this?
It's included in the training program. And if we look at the Procurement Practice Reform Act, the PPRA, it specifically addresses that in the context of small purchases, which generally is where I think the usage of that, of splitting comes up. And it is part of we do take notice of that and discuss it.
Very good. Thank you. Want to discuss the agency staffing and operations. How many total vacancies are there across the agency?
We currently have 42 vacancies. Within those vacancies, there's a reason why there's that number. So I'll just go through. Of that 42, 2 remain vacant because they were used to achieve a mid-year cut that OCP needed to achieve. On the plus side, 6 of those positions are currently in the last stage of recruitment, which is the suitability determination. So we expect to fill the 6 within the next couple of weeks. The candidates have been selected. They're going through the background checks and whatever they need to do for suitability. Of the 42, one has recently been hired, but it is not necessarily reflected in the Schedule A numbers yet. 8 positions are being held for vacancy savings to balance the budget. And then of the vacancies, an additional position is in salary negotiations. So we anticipate filling that within the next few weeks. And then when you make all those adjustments, we will have 24 vacancies remaining. And we're currently in the process of interviewing for 3 senior positions in the agency. So the bottom line is, of those 42, 24 remain currently as vacancies we are trying to fill or vacancies that we cannot fill at the moment.
So that's trying to fill or being held for vacancy
Well,
savings.
no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's 24 we can
Okay.
fill.
You're trying to fill. Okay.
Yes.
What's the average length of time that you have that your vacancies are open?
In fiscal year 24, it was 72 days. In fiscal year 25, it's 58 days.
Which positions have been vacant the longest?
The position that's been vacant the longest is one called the Chief Project Director. It's an MSS position, grade 16. And that was actually being intentionally held for filling, to be vacant for a while by me, because that pertains to the project team that was working on the past modernization.
Oh.
And with all the changes in that, it was determined by me not to fill it at that time.
Got it. Okay. How do these vacancies affect your agency's ability to accomplish its goals and meet deadlines effectively?
Well, I think it does have an impact because there's certain parts of OCP that have been hit much harder by some of the vacancies than others. We're always recruiting and trying to fill the vacancies, but in the end, some of the positions, some of the units have vacancies that they just need to be filled. And so it may affect the timing of how long it takes to process a procurement. And I think in some cases affects morale a bit too, in that people get discouraged if they see vacancies continuing.
What are some of the best practices you've implemented for retention and recruitment?
Well, for retention and recruitment, we're doing a few things. We do always the standard LinkedIn, well, DCHR website for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a presence on social media, so we will send out on OCP social media. We may post these things. We use LinkedIn, and with LinkedIn, we look at what we look at who's just out there on LinkedIn, and we can reach out to people on LinkedIn as well, as opposed to just
Posting.
waiting for them
Yeah.
to come to us.
Yeah.
We use the DC hiring fairs, and we used one of those recently, and it was very successful in terms of the number of candidates who attended and who were interested and were very qualified for positions. So when I said earlier that we had 6 that were in suitability,
Yeah. That was from the fair.
we had those from the hiring fair. So that was positive. Another thing we're looking at too is different ways to get people into OCP. We are able to take advantage of a program that DOES and DCHR have, where we can have an apprentice from an HBCU, and they are here for a year. And so we are nearing the end of our year with an apprentice, and I know that she's done very well, and she's indicated an interest in being in OCP. And that was a grade 11 position that we put in that program. So we are looking to do that some more. And I talked with this person last week, and the person told me the program was life-changing for her.
Wow.
So that's exciting for us to hear that it was worth her time and our time to invest in that particular program. We also get to take advantage of a program from the National Association of Procurement Officials. state procurement officials. They provide stipends for internships. We have qualified again this year to have 2 interns intern with OCP during the summer. Last year, we had excellent interns, and one of those was from Howard University, and she is interested in becoming a full-time employee with OCP as well. So we're trying some of these other sources.
Very good. Could you provide more details about the initiative to improve the transparency portal forecast model and how it'll enhance PASS?
Well, for me, this is an initiative I'm excited about because I know for the last several years, we've had the transparency portal forecast on our website. But this past year, I was looking at it and I thought, how useful is this to vendors? Because it had a lot of information, and I do believe sometimes you can provide someone too much information. And it had things on option years and a lot of the things. And option years aren't really what the vendors are going to be looking at because they want to be looking at new opportunities. So we really took out what I would call the information clutter and just focused on new opportunities. We also looked at, did we need all the search fields on it? Do vendors really need to search by some of these fields? So we've simplified the screen, and we've also made it so a vendor can download the information as well. So among other things, we've also done it with the dollar value, fiscal year, the quarter of the fiscal year, they can search by, and also dollar ranges. Because for competition purposes, we don't want to put the exact anticipated amount, but if we do it in ranges, vendors can then decide whether it's a project that they have the ability to support or not. So I think we've added, I think we've streamlined it and we've added information that would be relevant for vendors to know.
$4 million was previously allocated for this project. Can you provide a breakdown on that?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
So of the $4 million, we have approximately 2 million of that has been left for continuing ongoing project or new projects. And so we have been using it this year to mainly support the initiatives that we can do short of having a new automated procurement system.
Okay.
So that's what we've been focused on, and also using it towards improving our integrations with DIFs. That's been an important part of some of the issues that as DIFs has gone live in the last couple of years, keeping up to date and making sure that the integrations are effective.
And can you say more about the new pilot system for DC?
Oh, yeah, yes, because in the past, we have just had our contractor performance evaluation system, CPES, that evaluates things over $100,000 based on the contract administrator assigned to that. DC supply schedule contracts don't have a traditional contract administrator because multiple agencies can use the services. So we have multiple agencies that we would want to have evaluate the services. So what this does is we engaged with a vendor who's providing this system to other jurisdictions. And what happens is we are providing a quarterly download of the data of purchase orders that have been awarded against the DC supply schedule. The vendor then reaches out to the requisitioner who requested that purchase order to ask them to evaluate the goods or services. And it's standard criteria that they have for their system. It's a rating of up to 5 stars. And the questions are the same, whether you're in DC or whether you're in Louisiana, Massachusetts, any of the other states. And so the requisitioner can either respond, or a new feature that's coming soon is if the requisitioner feels they don't know enough about the performance, they can forward that to the person in their agency who does know, and then we can get a rating back. And so the idea is that the DC supply schedule is a significant program for us. And to have that significant program and not have ratings of the vendors, I think was something that was missing. So the idea is to make sure that we can assess the performance of the vendors on the supply schedule. So it's in its pilot phase. We've just really launched it, I believe, in mid-January. So we're still working on, we don't have enough data yet to make any conclusions, but we are working on getting the data.
Very good. Thank you. Program staff at several agencies reached out to the committee because they do not believe the procurement process is transparent. Specifically, contract officers reportedly do not inform agency partners when a solicitation is released, fail to share detailed status updates, or do not consult agencies on pre-bid meeting dates. Are you aware of these concerns?
I know that they have been raised by the committee. I know they were raised last year, and they are again raised this year by the committee. I think that there's always going to be issues in procurement. Procurement, a lot of it's communication. And so sometimes either whether it's on the part of the agency or the part of OCP, there may not be clear communication and understanding of the process and or what's needed by OCP. So I am aware that these issues have been raised.
Is it typical that an agency should know when a solicitation is released?
Generally, I think agencies should and usually do know when a solicitation is released. But I would want the agencies to know a lot about their solicitations.
Right, including detailed status updates.
Yeah.
Pre-bid meetings, et cetera.
Yeah.
Is it typically for a pre-bid meeting, is it both OCP and the agency that would be present there?
Yeah, it's typical. What we would typically do for that in either pre-bid or pre-proposal meeting would be that the contracting officer conducts the meeting, but we have whoever is the contract administrator designated by the program agency attend as well, because many of the questions at the pre-bid or pre-proposal meeting come with questions about the program versus the procurement process. So we would invite the contract administrator, who can bring other people from the program if necessary.
And the contract administrator's OCP staff, right?
No, they're agency
in
staff.
the agency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
As
the
opposed to
contracting officer would be
officer.
OCP, contract administrator, it's from the agency.
Very good, thank you. What is OCP's policy for ensuring program staff, agency staff are represented in the selection process?
Well, the program staff and or the agency staff, they're represented in different ways depending on the type of procurement it is. So I would say probably this issue comes up most in the context of requests for proposals. And in a request for proposal, once the agency, before it's ever issued, before the solicitation is ever issued, the agency participates in the development of the solicitation because they're going to indicate what it is they need. They're also going to indicate how they want to evaluate. In other words, what are the factors that are important to them in deciding which of the vendors should receive the award. So there's standard factors such as past performance, price, technical proposal, but they can all have different weights and different information that the program wants to see. So that's the beginning part of it. But once it's issued, we have the pre-proposal conference. We also get questions from potential bidders or offerors. And most of those questions are going to be on the technical parts of the solicitation. So we have to get input from the agency on the answer to those. And then once we receive the proposals, in the RFP context, there is an evaluation panel that's established by the contracting officer. But the membership of that panel is based upon recommendations from the program agency as to who they think that can best evaluate whatever is being sought under the solicitation. So it could be the contract administrator, it might be a couple different program administrators, they
But
might want
somebody
a
from their
financial
agency.
person. And we will generally accept the recommendations. There are just a few things. We don't like evaluation panels where the person who's the chair of the panel is the supervisor of everybody else on the panel. So in that case, we'd have to have a conversation because we don't want one person, the supervisor, to unduly influence the other panel members. And then it's availability. It's a lot of time and effort to be on an evaluation panel. They have to be willing to read the materials and then engage in multiple meetings to evaluate the proposals.
Yeah.
So that's how the agency would be involved.
Thank you. Agencies have also expressed concerns that OCP has no official policy for resolving disagreements or conflicts as they arise. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that I guess I would say I'm a little curious on why it would be an official policy on resolving contracts, because I think that we have, as every agency does, a chain of command, and our expectation is that agencies that have a contracting officer assigned to them, if they have an issue with that, they can go to the chief contracting officer, who is the supervisor of that contracting officer. We have a chief procurement officer. We have the chief procurement officer. We have a general counsel. So there's a lot of different avenues that people can take depending on what they're comfortable with. Some people may not want to go to the chief contracting officer. They may want to go to the deputy. So we are very open to people reaching out to us. And in some cases, some agencies, as a practice, they may go to their deputy mayor, who will then reach out to us via the assistant city administrator. So I'm not sure that a formal policy is needed for that, because I think that's basically how any organization would really operate.
Do you think there are different outcomes depending on which person that they go to, though? I mean, is there a need for uniformity that isn't currently there?
Well, most of the cases are going to be very fact-specific based on the situation. And sometimes it's a misunderstanding between two people. Sometimes it's not understanding the procurement process. Sometimes it's maybe a procurement person is not interpreting the rules as flexibly as they could. So I would say it's the standardization. We can't achieve 100% standardization, but we do the training. We reiterate certain things. We enforce with staff that they should be looking at the procurement law and the regulations. We also have our legal team available on many of these things. So I think that we have enough resources that we can resolve problems.
Thank you. The committee also received reports that agencies receive differing instructions regarding requirements depending on their contracting officer. Is that one that's come up for you before?
It does come up, and again, we can provide the guidance, we can give the rules and regulations, and in many of the cases, there's room for different interpretations in some cases. Sometimes people do misinterpret the rule. Some people bring their own backgrounds from other places where a rule might be interpreted differently. So we try to just continue in our training to emphasize our interpretation, and we encourage contracting officers and contract specialists to talk to their colleagues, to their if you're coming into a situation that you haven't dealt with before, talk to some of your coworkers. There's an excellent chance that they may have already encountered that situation.
Does the ombudsperson play a role in resolving these issues?
If they are brought to the ombudsman's attention, the ombudsman will. The ombudsman's role may in something between an agency and OCP may be just getting the right people together to have the discussion.
Sure.
And so that's what the ombudsman would do. I mean, ultimately, the contracting officer owns the procurement and has to own the decision, but the ombudsman can certainly facilitate and mediate.
So they describe their role as advocating for both agencies and vendors who face difficulties with the procurement process. How do they advocate? How does the ombudsperson advocate for agencies?
Well, I think maybe advocacy is probably a little bit strong in that because they're really more like a mediator. They get the right people together. They also, if they can facilitate having the agency provide the information, they may tell the agency what information they need to provide in order to address the situation. And then they can do the same thing for the chief, for the contracting officer, and bring them all together. And I'd say maybe mediator more than advocacy in that situation.
And how do you make agencies aware that they have the option to work with the ombuds?
Well, we have done executive procurement training with all the agency heads and senior staff. And so that making them aware of what the ombudsman that the ombudsman is available is certainly part of that. And we do refer people to the ombudsman. A lot of people, we are in transition now because right now we don't have an ombudsman. We're interviewing for that. But the ombudsman we had was very well known throughout the agencies and the vendor community. And that is what we would look to achieve with the person who's going to fill the position as well.
Very good. Oh. How long has that position been vacant?
That person retired the end of September.
Okay. Committee also has heard that contracting specialists at OCP may return a document for one issue, then upon correction, return it again for another issue, and so on, leading to a long and burdensome process. Is that something you've heard and is something that you're working on improving?
It's something I've heard, and it's something I've heard not just with OCP, but I hear the same complaint when people are dealing with the legal reviews from the Office of the Attorney General. Seems to be, I think, a little bit goes along with any time you have a reviewing body and there's multiple comments. I would say it's something that I encourage and want. I don't want piecemeal comments. If we can go through and address the whole thing at one time, then that is preferable, because if you give piecemeal comments, you don't even know what's coming up later in the document. It may address the issue that was already raised. And so we really emphasize that we want a holistic approach to providing comments. Now, sometimes if something is told, if we ask for something to be corrected, sometimes the corrected document may raise another issue, but that would be, I think, an understandable situation. What is less desirable is getting comments on the first part, and then maybe the next 20 pages, you get a separate set of contracts, so on.
Makes sense. Okay, let's see. Moving on to some questions about certified business enterprises. How do CBEs learn about OCP workshops?
Well, the workshops are include the information on them is included in on our website, for one thing. And we have two different workshops. One is the general vendor workshop, which any vendor can attend. And the other is specifically for vendors who are looking to get a DC supply schedule. And that is a mandatory workshop for those vendors. So we have on our website complete information on those workshops. And when we have engagement events, we do also share that information with the attendees at the event. So we will bring that up.
And how many general vendor workshops and DC supply schedule workshops has OCP hosted FY25 to date?
9 total.
How many, thank you, are planned for the remainder of the fiscal year?
We do one general vendor workshop and one DC supply schedule workshop per month. So that's 2 per month.
Great. And what's the typical attendance at these workshops?
I think it can be up to maybe 60 attendees. Now, these are virtual events.
Okay. How many vendors attended the past two OCP buys events, and when is the next one scheduled?
The next one, we're zeroing in on a date, but we're looking for probably late March for the next one, perhaps the beginning of April. And we're determining the topic now that we want to focus on.
And how many vendors attended the past two of them?
I would say probably about 50 vendors each, maybe.
Very good. Can you describe how your agency addresses concerns raised by client agencies?
So we, again, it depends on the concern
Sure.
that's raised, but we try to have a lot of the resolution occur with the contracting officer or the chief contracting officer. I think one thing about our model is that we have many procurement staff embedded in the larger agencies that they support. So we want there to be a lot of resolution of issues right at that level with the contracting officer. And if the contracting officer can't resolve it, the chief contracting officer. Most chief contracting officers have multiple agencies within their portfolio. And then if we have to go beyond that, then we can go to the the deputy chief procurement officer or the chief procurement officer. I also try to do outreach just with the specific agencies so that I can talk directly to them to find out what their procurement concerns are, and that they also know they can reach out to us or to me specifically.
Great. Your responses list an audit of district agencies' contract administration. Could you say more about that?
That is an audit that the Office of the Attorney General is conducting, and they are looking at what the program agents are doing to administer the contracts to determine whether the administration is effective and whether the district is receiving the goods or services that we have contracted for.
Do they do that periodically, or is this a new thing?
They will do different audits at different times. The Office of the Attorney General tends to, at the beginning of the year, just determine what aspect of procurement they want to audit. So this time they're auditing the contract administration. It may not be a regular audit that they do.
In a recent report, OIG made findings that emergency, sole source, and normal procurements are not operating effectively at OCP. Did you agree with that assessment?
There were parts of it that I agreed with. I think that the findings were actually based on a very small sample of determination and findings that were not completely signed in accordance with the regulations. So we do take seriously our requirement to have documents properly approved, signed and approved. So we have engaged, we reissued a list of all the determination and findings and who needs to sign each of those documents, as well as reminding the staff that they needed to do that. OPIC, our Office of Procurement Integrity and Compliance, will conduct a periodic review of contract files to determine that. And then we are maintaining in our Procurement Training Institute the importance of properly documenting actions. That's an important part of contracting, is to make sure we're doing contemporaneous documents that are fully compliant.
And what is OCP's process for ensuring new legal requirements are incorporated into solicitations, contracts, and option renewals?
So generally, if it's something that requires a new clause, we will have our legal team work and work with us on developing the clause. And then depending on what the requirement is, we'll do a couple things. We'll disseminate it globally to OCP through our email system. And actually, if it's something that we think agencies need to know who are not under our procurement authority, I will disseminate it to the Best Practices Committee as well. And then we also update our templates. So it's one thing to just send a clause out, but then we got to make sure that it's in the templates that people use on a regular basis for soliciting. So we will do that. And then some of the changes, the legal changes, are going to require more detailed training. So we will either incorporate it into our regular training, or if we have to conduct a specific roundtable or other training on that, we will do that as well.
Okay. All right. A few questions about contractors. Can you walk me through the solicitation process for requests for qualifications, RFQs?
Okay, so the request for qualification, I'm assuming you're referring to the human care agreement situation. So that is one where the basic premise of the human care agreement is that we are choosing contractors first based on their what we would call their professional and financial responsibility. In other words, not so much on their technical proposal, because many of these are things human care services can include educational programs. They can include services by psychologists or social workers. So a variety of things where you're not necessarily looking for a complete technical proposal at the beginning. So we have in our regulations the factors that are to be considered for a company to become qualified. So the idea is that we issue an announcement we do issue it in the paper that we are seeking qualification statements from providers of human care services. And this statement requires them to provide various information on their financial capabilities, maybe their staffing, the certifications that the facility has, the certifications that the staff has, and go through a variety of those things. There's an initial panel that determines if the vendor is qualified. If the vendor, whoever is deemed qualified, then, and actually I should probably call them providers, not vendors, whatever providers are deemed qualified, then we request and negotiate pricing with them. Pricing may be for a facility, pricing may be for a training program, or it could be on an hourly rate that we just agree on. And then if we agree on that, we enter into what is called the human care agreement. The human care agreement is not a contract in the traditional sense. It's more, I think, what I would call an agreement on generally what's going to be done and the prices. And it is not a commitment on the part of the district for any particular amount of money. The commitment occurs when the contracting officer issues a task order or purchase order specifying the services that we want, such as the number of hours or the number of clients to be seen. At that point, when the task order or purchase order is issued, then it becomes a binding commitment.
Are the provider qualifications determined by the agency requesting the solicitation or OCP?
It's going to be both are going to look at it.
And is there a CBE preference for human care agreement RFQs?
It is not applied for the human care agreements.
And what guidelines does your agency issue to ensure that staff are producing high quality RFPs?
I'd say that we have, first of all, our training program. We do go through that, and we have, in our training program, we have what we call foundations, which is what every new person goes through.
Okay.
But then we have tiers. And so our tier 1 is the more of the basics. And then for those who are going to be working on more complex procurements, we have tier 2, which goes into much more of the detail of requests for proposals and how to evaluate them and how to just process them. We also have our templates and job aids. And recently this year, we revised what we call our procurement policy library. And that includes information on contracts. We divided it into, we have the statute and regulations and statutes there that they must address. We have job aids, we have the templates, and the policy documents. And so we have that all there that is available to any person doing a procurement. And I think the templates are especially important because they set forth the basic structure.
Very good. In your responses, you mentioned that OCP is interested in reviewing the exercise of option periods and DC supply schedule contracts. Is there anything the council can do to help eliminate current obstacles?
Well, I think we are open to any discussions with the contract council on this. I think over the years, there's been questions and different administrations have dealt with it differently about if a contract is awarded with a base period and the options are specified in the contract, including the pricing for it, and there's no material change, what is the value or where is the value in those being reviewed again? And we would have our definition of what the value is, and I think the council would have to decide what the value is. I know that I've heard it stated that is a way for the council to engage in oversight of various programs or agencies. And so I think one thing that we would say would be, is that something that needs to occur? And again, that would be a balancing the two viewpoints, I think.
Sure. So when an option year is being considered, there is a window of time where that contract is being evaluated based on performance. So what type of inputs are you taking at that time?
Before we exercise an option, we reach out to the program agency that's getting the services and saying, has the service been satisfactory, or did you receive satisfactory goods? And do you want to continue this? Have there been any issues with the contractor? And so it's a basic question, but the idea is that if the contractor's not performing properly, we don't necessarily want to go forward with the option exercise.
Yeah.
And sometimes we ask the agency, do you want to go forward? Because their budget may not be such that they can support that, or maybe they've made a change in their program direction. So we always want to check with the program agency to see, is this something you want? And then if they say yes, under our contracts, the standard clause is that we give a contractor 30 days notice of our intent to exercise an option.
And so it's primarily a conversation between you and the client agency about
Correct.
whether to move forward. Any other parties involved?
Well, let me say that the contract, our options are written as unilateral options. So it's the vendor does not have a choice. It's what they've agreed to at the beginning.
Right.
That they said that it would be our decision. Obviously, we always do the checking for clean hands. And so that would be
Oh,
something.
you do that before an option year?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we have a document that we call the bidder offeror certification, which is a multi-page document. It talks about, it's on their responsibility.
Okay.
So do they have any criminal actions? Do they, a whole bunch of things. And so we get that document as well.
Okay. Okay. I guess the only, the big missing link there, it's not implying that it has to be council, but would be, for public facing agencies. If the public feels that a product or a service is not being provided adequately, but the agency thinks it is, then that can be a time when people come to the council and say, how dare you all renew the option year. Do you see that happen much?
I can't recall of a specific situation where we've seen a disagreement between the agency and the public.
Okay.
Now, sometimes the contractor may not be performing as well as people would like, but we're in a position where the alternatives are limited. So
Sure.
maybe in that case, we just have to figure out how we can make the situation better, or maybe we do a partial option while the agency decides whether they want to recompete and
Yeah.
have us recompete.
I guess that the ones that I think of most that were most public were not under OCP's purview anyway. They're more like food contracts with schools, et cetera, where you really see a lot of heated dialogue. I'm sure if I thought about it more, I could come up with a couple that are under your purview.
But I do recognize that that's a situation
Yeah.
where that has happened.
Yeah, and that's typically when the council is called to weigh in or intervene or provide oversight. And so I think that that is, just something we should keep
Mhm.
in mind, and think about whether there is ever an opportunity to provide third-party input before an option year renewal in very particular cases where you might be thinking, oh, you know what, this is one the public might care about. Before we go down this road, let's make sure we've got all the information. Okay. And does OCP permit agencies to negotiate on price in final contract awards?
Price negotiations are led by the contracting officer. However, especially in the RFP situation, the agency is going to probably be part of the team that's going to address whether the pricing is reasonable or realistic for what is being obtained. We can also look at various other professional sources. There's some sources that are available to us on what certain pricing metrics are for certain types of goods or services. But the agency also has an understanding of what they're obtaining. And so they
Right.
can. Now, in an invitation for bid situation, we don't negotiate the price. We get the bid, we get the price, it's take it or leave it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. In those situations, does the agency have the opportunity to weigh in and say, like, this doesn't seem like the standard that we're used to?
Well, I think the agency weighs in not so much on the standard, but what their budget will allow
Fair
them
enough.
to support.
Fair enough. Or, for example, and I think this came up a bit with the recycling contract, was like, this seems like a ridiculously low number. How is that possible? That type of thing. Is that something that is a conversation between the agency and the procurement officer, typically, if that's a scenario?
Yeah, that could be a conversation with them. And I think in recycling, that again was an RFP, a request for
Right.
proposals. And
Right.
so, yeah, because price can be unreasonable, but being too low, it's not just too high.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. The OCP procurement procedures manual states that review panels may have access to bid pricing, but this varies based on OCP's decision. Since bid pricing is critical for assessing feasibility and cost appropriateness, this is kind of what I was getting at, is there a reason it shouldn't always be provided to the review panel?
Well, I think that perhaps there's some guidance, and I think this comes up in requests for proposals, because again, they're the ones with review panels.
Yes.
The standard solicitation language first says that the technical proposal is evaluated separately from price. And so what that really means is not that the panel can't ever see the price, but that you decide whether something's technically acceptable before you look at the price.
Yes.
So that we don't in the district say that this is technically acceptable because it's really cheap.
Right.
So I think that perhaps this is one of these areas that maybe you have been hinting at earlier, where sometimes I think people may interpret that to mean that the panel can't ever see the price. And it's not really that statement, but that may be
It's meant to insulate them from that consideration initially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. At last year's performance oversight hearing, you testified that OCP planned to complete an updated procurement procedures manual by the end of the year. Can you provide an update on that?
I can provide an update. Unfortunately, we were not able to finish it, and we did have a person assigned to that. Unfortunately, that person became very ill and since passed away.
I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
then given our other vacancies, we just ran out of bandwidth to move that forward as aggressively as we would have liked. It's not forgotten. We're working on it still, and we will continue to work on it until we get it completed.
I'm sorry to hear that is the reason. OAG reviews certain contracts for legal sufficiency. Is that right?
Yeah, the contract's over $1 million.
Got it. Have that in common.
Yes.
At what stage is a contract sent to OAG for review?
That is sent to OAG for review after we've completed the evaluation process. We've drafted the contract. We have the contractor sign the contract, but we, the district, have not signed it yet. And then it goes through our internal review, which the reviewer in OCP is the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer.
Mhm.
When the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer says everything looks pretty good, we should go forward with it, it's sent to OAG at that time.
Okay, so then it's the deputy CPO. Is the OCP General Counsel reviewing the contract too?
No, they do not do that review. They will probably most likely have been involved during the solicitation process. If questions have come up about a part of a proposal, what the vendor meant, or what kind of clause should we have in the solicitation, that's where they're going to do most of their review.
Got it. The PPRA requires the transparency portal to include specific documents for all contracts over $100,000. However, many required documents are currently missing from the portal, and some contracts are not listed at all. The information in the transparency portal is public to the is public records, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if the public is seeking information from the portal and find that information is missing or not up to date, what should they do?
Well, they should reach out to someone in OCP.
Mhm.
That could be the ombudsman. It could be our communications division, could be a contracting officer, could be anybody.
Mhm.
And if it's something that should have been on the portal, my practice is to have that immediately placed on the portal and then let the requester know that it is now there for them to review.
Okay. And how long does that typically take if someone reaches out?
If we can get the contract, it could be a matter of later that same day that can be posted.
Very good. Is there anywhere on the portal that says, if you're having an issue, here's who you contact?
I don't really know.
Yeah, that would be good. Because that way you don't have to guess at who to
Yeah,
contact.
I can check on that.
It's certainly nice that they can reach out to anybody, but
Yeah.
if you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Okay. And whose job is it under the PPRA to make contracts publicly accessible, OCP or the soliciting agency?
OCP.
Okay, great. Back to one of our favorite topics, green food and EPS. Okay. Can you provide an update on all EPS activities for FY24, please?
Sure. We have been working closely with DOEE. I think since our last hearing, what I can say for sure is that we have a much closer working relationship with DOEE. Our chief operating officer is meeting, I believe it's monthly with them. And so again, I think we had talked about this a little bit the last time. We were in the process of updating some of the EPPS category specifications. And so we have currently updated and posted what we actually linked to the DOEE site, but those are the current ones are all there. We have, we've been working on, and it's still in development, that process map for the system where DOEE has to certify all contracts in excess of 100,000 is either being EPPS certified or whether they are waived or exempted from that requirement. So that is something we're still working with DOEE on, and we will continue to work on them. In terms of, well, I guess I'm getting into the green food part
That's
too, but
okay.
we're also working with them on the acquisition. Well, it's for both.
Okay.
For the EPS and for the green food, we work with them on the acquisition plan for identifying those procurements that might be appropriate for either of those procurement programs.
Mm-hmm. Great. And is there an FTE that handles the EPS and green food purchasing right now?
Right now, it's the same FTE, who's, I think, increased a percentage of her time that she's spending on this. And again, I mentioned the chief operating officer is also more intimately involved in this.
And are you posting a position for this?
It is posted,
Okay.
and
Yes.
we are recruiting, and we are hopeful that it can be filled. We did try to recruit earlier,
Yeah.
and we were unable to have a successful recruitment at that time. The candidate did not accept the position, so we reposted.
Got it. Always disappointing. And then how has the $271,000 in recurring NPS funding for EPS and green food being used?
We are doing two things. One, we're using some of that to support the one program analyst. And the other is we have in our, we now have what we call a learning management system where we can do courses that can be available on demand. And so we are using that for the development of the training on that and making it available to staff.
Okay. There are 3 pending lawsuits by employees naming the agency as a party alleging mismanagement, unlawful termination, failure to accommodate, and retaliation. Could you provide any information on the status or details of these cases?
Yeah, if you could just
Yes, I
give
went
me a second.
I went
too,
back a
because
little bit here.
Because I know I have the information. Okay. I'm sorry, you're asking
So,
about,
the 3 pending lawsuits by employees naming the agency as a party alleging mismanagement, unlawful termination, failure to accommodate, and retaliation. Could you provide any information on the status or details of these cases?
okay, so for one of those cases, the OEA has issued a decision, and we are in the process of addressing the order for back pay. In the other one, there was a court judgment, and we are, I think that case is still pending, but there, as far as I know, there's no further actions on that. It just may still be pending. And the third one is scheduled for trial in August of 2025.
Thank you. The agency also underwent 2 investigations, one in FY25 for alleged employee unethical behavior and another from FY24 regarding improper conduct during the solicitation process. Now that both investigations are complete, can you confirm whether allegations were substantiated?
Okay, in the one on unethical behavior, it was substantiated, and the other investigation, it was not substantiated.
What corrective actions were taken in the first case?
In the first case, the employee did have to receive additional training, and this particular one was also the subject of a BEGA decision, and a fine was assessed by BEGA.
And what protections are in place to prevent retaliation against employees by middle and upper management?
Well, any staff knows within OCP that we have our Office of Procurement Integrity and Compliance that they can go to. We also have our staff, make sure our staff is very aware of the ability to go to BEGA, the Board of I'm just going to say Bega.
Vega's fine.
And then the Office of the Inspector General. And our General Counsel, we have a very engaged ethics officer as well, who's within our Office of General Counsel. And so staff are familiar with that person and know that they can go to either the ethics officer or the General Counsel as well.
Thank you. Your responses indicate that the current pass system does not track the average number of days between when an agency submits a solicitation or RFP to OCP for review and when OCP posts it. Is there a required timeline for posting once received?
There's not a required timeline, but we do like to, from when we initiate a procurement, we have sort of, I guess, standard.
Sure. What's
timelines.
you consider
For an
your standard?
RFP, I would say if it's under $1 million, we would say we would like the completion of the procurement within 120 days. And again, that also depends on how much back and forth there needs to be, whether the statement of work arrives in a good place, whether there's issues that we need to work out.
Okay. And how often are they completed and posted within your timeline?
I don't have, I'm not able to track that
Okay.
right now.
Okay. Okay. I believe that is all that I have for you today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this concludes today's performance oversight hearing. If you plan on submitting written testimony for the record, please do so by going to the council hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. The record will close on Wednesday, March 12th at 5:30 p.m. The time is 1:57 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.